Good afternoon and welcome to, or good evening and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council's hosted public hearing regarding the American Rescue Plan. And we are joined today, this evening, by Councilwoman Strasburger, Councilman Coghill, Councilman Wilson, Councilman Bruce Kraus, Councilman Lavelle, who is our finance chair, and Councilman Ricky Burgess. Did I miss anyone?
Nope, you got them all.
Okay, with that said, we're going to start our public hearing. You have 3 minutes to speak, and your time is up, and your mic will be shut off after 3 minutes. So, the clerk, please call the first 3 names.
Emery, okay. Number 1 is Joy Bronstein, Kevin Quasenberry, and Ed Nasser.
Am I live?
Yes, Joy.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Good evening, esteemed City Council members. It's good to see all of you. My name is Joy Bronstein. I serve as the Western PA Director of Policy and Development for Clean Water Action. Clean Water Action is a member of Lead Safe Allegheny and a participant in the Get the Lead Out campaign. First, thank you for providing this opportunity for input into the allocation of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. There are many more than enough projects and initiatives that are worthy of these funds, which is why I applaud your proposal to allocate $20 million dedicated to addressing lead in our city. Your commitment to improving public and environmental health in Pittsburgh is demonstrated by this allocation, and it is to be publicly commended. That said, and while we are grateful for this public hearing, as well as the one you held on Saturday, less than 1 week of public engagement is not sufficient to develop an equitable proposal that reflects the wishes, needs, and priorities of all of Pittsburgh's residents. The Get the Lead Out campaign is disappointed in the lack of clarity around timeline for approval, opportunities for public input, and accountability for funds allocated to entities outside of the city. Clean Water Action would prefer to see you use this historical opportunity to assure equitable investment in our communities. Thus, we join our friends and colleagues in calling for the vote to be paused until an equitable, people-centered public process is conducted. As you go through that equitable and people-centered public process, we ask that you assure comprehensive lead prevention and exposure, and that you are making a decision to protect the public health of all of the city's residents. This means that all sources of lead need to be addressed. Those sources include paint, dust, water, and soil, not just water. While a continued investment in removing lead from water in our infrastructure is certainly needed in Pittsburgh, we ask that you also invest in assuring that the most common sources of lead exposure in children are addressed. Please dedicate a portion of the ARPA funds to remediate paint, dust, and soil exposure as well. We know that this was President Biden's intent, as he spoke about and the White House announced in the spring, and that intent followed the releasing of these funds to assure that lead abatement from all sources that put vulnerable populations at risk is abated. This will prevent future millions of dollars in Pittsburgh alone from being spent on healthcare costs to treat people who have neurological damage that will cause lifelong impacts that you are all keenly aware of. As our colleagues have previously testified on Saturday, there are 3 specific ways in which the ARPA funds can be used to comprehensively address lead in paint, dust, and soil. Those are inspections of rental homes and child-occupied facilities for lead in paint, dust, and soil, ensuring renovations and repairs permitted by the city are done in a lead-safe manner, and conducting lead-safe demolitions. You have the flexibility that you need to determine how the ARPA funds will be spent based on Pittsburgh's needs. Please use part of the funds to shift to a prevention model for addressing lead exposure and lead poisoning of our children. Please prioritize this public health and justice and make sure that you follow.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Kevin Quasenberry, followed by Ed Nasser.
Hi, thank you. Am I live?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, council members and staff. My name is Kevin Quasenberry. I'm the litigation director at the Community Justice Project, a nonprofit law firm in Pennsylvania's legal aid network, and I work here in our Pittsburgh office. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments today. My comments are made on behalf of myself and my organization, and as a participant in the Get the Lead Out Pittsburgh campaign. I'd like to focus my comments on two elements of the American Rescue Plan funding proposal being considered by council, one substantive and one procedural. First, substantively, I want to commend council members and the mayor's office for proposing to prioritize $20 million in the ARP funds to address lead poisoning in the city of Pittsburgh. This commitment is fully in line with the Department of Treasury's guidance on how these funds can be used, and it's in line with the scope of the problem in the city. In the mayor's press release describing this $20 million commitment, the mayor indicated that these funds would be used to implement policies addressing both lead-based paint hazards and lead hazards in drinking water. However, in the itemized spending projection that accompanied the press release, these funds were described as being limited to replacing PWSA's lead service lines. I believe that that itemization may not reflect council's current intents with the funds, but I urge council to clarify this and ensure that the $20 million is used to implement policies that address each of the major pathways of lead exposure in the city, not just the replacement of PWSA's lead service lines. As a reminder, when we met with each of you through 2019 and 2020, lead in water constitutes about 2% of the problem. The vast majority of lead poisoning cases occurs because kids are exposed to lead paint and dust in their homes and lead in their soil. I'd like to remind you of council's unanimous commitment last October during National Lead Poisoning Prevention Week to, quote, commit to drafting and introducing legislation that will prevent Pittsburgh from being further poisoned by lead in our built environments and to support children to live in their full potential. And I would urge you to use these ARP funds to implement the elements of that legislation once it is enacted, which we hope will be soon. Finally, with regard to process, it is our fundamental belief that any decision-making process for the spending of public funds ought to be people-centered and built around the following principles: equity, inclusion, transparency, and accountability. As you've heard from commenters tonight and during Saturday's public hearing, there are many voices and many priorities in our communities. It's important that the city ensure that we have an equitable, inclusive, transparent, systematic process for community members to share their input and try to influence decision makers. Therefore, I would ask council to consider delaying any final vote on the spending of ARP funds to allow for more time for a more robust public process. Thank you again, and good evening.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Ed Nasser, followed by Derek Tillman.
Hi, I'm Ed Nusser, and I'm the Executive Director of City of Bridges Community Land Trust. We're located at 143rd Street in Lawrenceville. Thank you, council members, for your time tonight. This is a historic moment for our city. We may never again see a federal investment as large as the American Rescue Plan. We're thankful to see community land trusts and our model of community-centered, permanently affordable housing receive an allocation. Our development pipeline has us in a position to break ground on more than 45 homes in 7 neighborhoods in the next 15 months, if gap funding is available. Additionally, we, like many other housing developers, are encountering delays and cost increases due specifically to COVID. Early ARP dollars could allow us to move an 8-unit project currently stalled immediately into construction. There are numerous issues just like these that need immediate attention, but there are also numerous items that need thoughtful, inclusive deliberation. What we are asking tonight is that City Council find a balance between addressing our city's immediate needs and investing in our future. And this balance will take time to find, and it needs to be community-centered. We are asking that City Council recognize the power of the choices before you and ensure that before a decision is made, time is allowed for residents, community organizations, and stakeholders to have their voices heard about our $335 million. There is no denying that there are fallouts from COVID that need quick attention, but the proposal put forward has many programmatic investments that are the priorities of an outgoing administration and have legitimate questions surrounding them. We've heard some of those earlier from Get the Lead Out Pittsburgh, and there are others in the housing world as well around allocations to specific URA programs or concepts that are moving forward. We need to take time with these big questions. We must have a community-centered conversation about our ARP funds. We need a broad, inclusive conversation about how we use this historic federal investment to build a more equitable and just Pittsburgh. We don't need to rush. We can find a balance between the urgent matters of the day and immediate COVID response and systems changing investments. We can find a way to balance the priorities of the outgoing administration with the reality that a new mayor will be at the helm in just 6 months. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Derek Tillman, followed by Robert Damewood and James Otoole.
Thank you. Mr. Tillman? Derek? I don't see him on here. Do you?
Yeah, no, I don't see Mr. Tillman. The next speaker would be Mr. Damewood, Robert
Damewood.
Damewood.
Mr. Damewood?
Hello. Yes, thank you.
Hi. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Robert Damewood. I'm a staff attorney with Regional Housing Legal Services, and I'm also a resident of Mount Washington. I'd like to start by thanking Mayor Peduto and the Pittsburgh Recovery Task Force for including funding for the preservation of affordable housing and for community land trust initiatives in the proposed ARP allocation plan. Funding for these items is essential if we want to have any hope of offsetting the impact that the pandemic has had on the local housing market, particularly the increased need for affordable housing. Like others who have spoken before me, I echo that we need a community-driven, deliberative process to identify funding priorities. And like others who spoke on Saturday, I urge you to allocate substantially more funding for affordable rental housing. $5 million is not nearly enough to address the scale of the problem. Pittsburgh had a shortage of 20,000 affordable homes before the pandemic. And given the economic damage experienced by renters over the last 15 months, the problem is certainly far worse now. Yet the proposed spending plan would allocate only 1.4% of the city's ARPA funds for rental housing. That's abysmal. Renters represent 55% of Pittsburgh's households, yet their needs go largely unaddressed in this proposed plan. The plan would allocate $36.5 million for homeowners, more than 7 times as much as it would provide for rental housing. Homeowners have suffered from the pandemic and they need help, but renters have fared far worse. It's well documented that renters were far more housing insecure before the pandemic and that they experienced greater housing insecurity as a result of the pandemic. There are also important equity considerations at stake. Pittsburgh's recovery plan should provide an equitable recovery that gives the greatest help for the hardest hit, but the proposed plan does the exact opposite of that. The data is clear that Black, low-wage, and female-headed households experience disproportionately worse health and economic hardships throughout the pandemic and are expected to continue on that trajectory throughout the recovery. Such households are far more likely to rent than to own their homes. Providing 7 times more funding for homeownership than for rental housing effectively shortchanges Pittsburgh's Black, low-wage, and female-headed households, the very demographics who are the hardest hit. Equity requires that Pittsburgh renters receive more assistance, not less. At the very minimum, there needs to be funding parity between homeowners and renters. Pittsburgh has a unique opportunity to begin addressing housing inequities that have been exacerbated by the pandemic. It's imperative that we do so now, and we may not get another chance. For these reasons, I ask that Council postpone a decision and allocate at least $36.5 million of its ARPA funds for affordable rental housing at deep affordability.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is James Otoole, followed by Anna Deming.
Hi, all. Can you hear me?
Yes, please continue. State your name and address for the record, please.
James Otoole, 5133 Carnegie Street, 15201. Thanks all for the opportunity to speak. Lots of important issues being discussed here, and I'm just going to focus my remarks on a smaller potential line item. I was a software engineer in the Department of Innovation and Performance from January 2019 until late last year. I worked on open data, among other things. Had great, capable, diligent colleagues, but one of the reasons I left was the city's failure to invest the resources necessary to develop a modern analytics practice that you see in many, many other cities. We hear a lot about Pittsburgh as a smart city, but I was the only software engineer doing that work at the time. Spent months trying to hire a colleague, but the budget simply wasn't enough to get somebody with the sufficient experience. The consequence of this is that decision makers in the city are all too often flying blind when they make policy decisions. On limited occasions that analysis occurs, it's either siloed within departments or performed as a one-off by high-priced consultants. So there's an opportunity to avoid waste and do that work in-house if you make this a modest priority. We tried on multiple occasions when I was there to get an inventory of all city data sets as required under the 2014 Open Data Law, and we simply couldn't do it. That was in significant part because outside the police bureau, there are very few people responsible for data governance and management within their departments. So the capacity just wasn't there. I think another part of that is the way that analysis is structured in the city, but that's beyond the scope of today's discussion. For perhaps $2 million, we could have a chief data officer, 3 experienced software engineers, 3 data scientists working out of the mayor's office, and specialized analysts operating out of the departments. This would be a massive step forward for the city's ability to make evidence-based decisions. As council members, wouldn't it be great if you had easy access to information about your districts, maybe in a weekly email, things like construction, 311 complaints, traffic safety? Shouldn't the mayor's office be looking at the same stuff citywide as they make priorities? Shouldn't the public have access to this information as they advocate for reform in their neighborhoods? The Berg's IDU data portal was a strong start in this regard, but 5 years later, the tech is outdated and it's increasingly unmaintainable for the current team. I myself have been volunteering my time to help build out police transparency dashboards of the type recommended by the task force last year, things like use of force and incidents, officer discipline. And to my reading of the Open Data Law, the proactive publication of this and anything else available under the Right to Know law is mandated by the open data legislation. But with this and a lot of other data sets, the city's been out of compliance with its own law for a long time, not because of any malfeasance, but simply because there haven't been the resources or in the will to make this a priority. It can seem wonky, but ultimately open data is about enabling better decisions by policymakers on behalf of city residents and giving residents the ability to better understand their neighborhoods and advocate for change. So I think now's the time to invest, and with a modest investment, Pittsburgh could be doing a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker, Joanna Deming, followed by Steve Branch, Mel Packer.
Joanna Deming, is she on here? I don't see her. Oh, I see. Hi, please state your name. Please state your name and neighborhood for the record.
Joanna Deming, Perry Hilltop Citizens Council, Fine View Citizens Council, resident Perry Hilltop.
Thank you, Joanna.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I just wanted to commend the decision to invest in affordable housing. This is critical. Housing has been impacted greatly by COVID-19. So many vulnerable households still on the verge of eviction crisis. We need to make sure to support those renters, make sure that they can stay where they are. In addition, we want to take this opportunity. So much of our housing stock is getting bought by investors, and we want to make sure that we have funds, groups like mine, to buy naturally occurring affordable housing before the investors get that and preserve that for the long term. And we think $5 million is great, but we can do better. It's going to take more resources than that. In addition, we're excited you are supporting the community land trust concept, and we have partnered with the land trust and are partnering for over 20 homes over the next few years. And we think that the long-term affordability is critical. You need to balance the individual and the community's needs. And we think that this is the perfect model to do so. Helping people get into home ownership, build modest wealth, and also ensuring that property goes on to the generations after them, and that the community can stay racially and economically diverse. This is our fight. This is what we want to see. Makes no sense to improve our community if our residents cannot stay and benefit from that development. We have to be proactive, and this may be one of our only opportunities to take this big stride forward and do this important work. We also need tools at the city, like the land bank, to work with us to acquire property, to preserve it for affordable homes. We support the $10 million for the land bank. For too long, it has sat without resources to make an impact, and we need to change that. We need to also be better as a city at maintaining our property. We are the neighbors, the city. We are the people. We are the ones not maintaining our property, and we have to change that. The URA has a great program that cares for things like cutting grass. So we support the $6 million to fund the vacant land and structure maintenance initiative, and where we could hire local groups and local neighbors to do this work. We also need to continue to support our homeless and those on the street with the $2 million allocation. We are seeing great results when
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Speaker is C. Branch, followed by Mel Packer.
Could you say the name again, Madam Clerk?
Stacy Branch.
Thank you. Stacy, are you on? I don't see her, but I do see Mel.
Next speaker is Mel Packer.
Mel
My mic
Packer.
live?
Yes, you're on. Please
Hi,
state your name.
My name is Mel Packer, resident of Point Breeze since 1997, Pittsburgh for the most part since 65, and a volunteer with various social justice organizations. I'd like you to take a moment to imagine a scenario with me regarding the sudden infusion of money to a family. Imagine you're part of a multiple sibling family which has just inherited a large chunk of cash from deceased parents with the instructions that it should be used to improve the community of both theirs and the sibling residences. You all know of this inheritance. You're pleased to hear of it. You eagerly anticipate family meetings to figure out where to put this money based on collective input. But suddenly you're informed that one of your siblings has already devised a spending plan and intends to proceed with its dispensation without any input from the rest of you. Would you feel left out? Would you feel like the sense of family has been violated? Would you be upset that none of your proposals were considered? Without a doubt, you would. And that's how the family of Pittsburgh feels today. We, the residents of Pittsburgh, even our power structures, are very fond of insisting and bragging that, quote unquote, we are family. It's a song about it, partly about the Pirates in 1979, but often sung and highlighted officially by the city government, and sometimes, but only sometimes, felt by our residents. I say sometimes because families don't kick out its poorer siblings, as we've done in the last few years by aiding developers who build luxury apartments they can't afford. Sometimes because families don't refuse to demand that their richer siblings kick in for the common good, as Pittsburgh has done with UPMC and others. Sometimes because families don't let one sibling decide how to spend the inheritance without input from all. And that's exactly what's happening with the mayor's American Rescue Plan's $335 million quote unquote inheritance. Where is the community input as written in the Treasury Department guidance, which reads, quote, Treasury urges local governments to engage their constituents and communities in developing plans to use these payments, unquote. You get that? It says engage us, not ignore us. Just one example, the lack of significant funding for resident renters is enough to make anyone realize that this proposal fails to consider many of the needs of the city's population, and in particular, its low-wage workers. Our family is not being treated as family, and we're demanding the right to participate in those decisions. To do less is to violate public trust. To do less is to rule by fiat. To do less is to slap residents in the face and treat us as outsiders. To do less is to allow a ruling elite to make decisions for the rest of us, no matter how it affects our lives. Just stop it. Reject this plan. Demand public input and participation in decision-making. That's called democracy. And that will allow you to go to bed and rest your head tonight and once again honestly say to yourself, we are family, and know that you made that happen. Thank you very much.
Next speaker, Chris Rossbot, followed by Mark Masterson and Linda McCarthy.
Hi, I first want to thank members of council for the opportunity to provide testimony at tonight's meeting. My name is Chris Rossbot, Policy Director at Pittsburgh Community Reinvestment Group, or PCRG. I'm also a resident of Council District 1 in the North Side, Spring Garden neighborhood. I would also like to note that I submitted for the public record a letter to the city clerk further detailing the main points of my testimony. First, PCRG would like to thank the administration and members of City Council for its advocacy in securing federal funding for COVID-19 relief. These critical funds were made available through the American Rescue Plan Act signed by President Biden on March 11, 2021. Pittsburgh's allocation of $335 million will provide much needed assistance to communities hit hardest by the pandemic and will allow city government to fill in operating deficits caused by lost revenue. PCRG would also like to advocate for the inclusion of ARPA funding to programs and initiatives to help lift our most vulnerable citizens and marginalized communities who have suffered the most during the ongoing pandemic. And I would like to emphasize it is still ongoing, and particularly our Black and Brown residents. The unemployment rate among Black women remains high. Small businesses continue to need support. Housing inequities remain, and the city continues its stagnant land recycling efforts. PCRG is requesting City Council to table its upcoming votes on the plan until a comprehensive, inclusive, and transparent public engagement process is conducted. As a membership-based nonprofit organization representing over 40 community-based organizations throughout Pittsburgh, our members have expressed concern over the lack of public engagement from the Joint Pittsburgh Recovery Task Force and the Peduto administration. Prior to the administration's public announcement of its spending plan, which was released on June 28th, the public had little input on the allocation priorities. This is troubling since the president signed the recovery package almost 4 months ago. Moreover, the administration has remained vague on details for many of its proposals. Investments like the $10 million directed towards the Pittsburgh Land Bank and the 20+ million in Own Pittsburgh are encouraging. However, after last week's post agenda, it remains unclear how those funds will be utilized to increase capacity and output. PCRG and our members would like to urge council to create a committee made up of leaders at CDCs and CBOs to assist the URA as it works towards the allocations of these critical dollars. Additionally, should council move towards passing legislation to allocate the existing plan, we would like to urge you to include.
The next speaker, Mark Masterson, followed by Linda McCarthy.
Hello, my name is Mark Masterson. I live in Observatory Hill, and I'd like to get started by thanking Council for holding public hearings and for the opportunity to speak on the allocation of the American Recovery Program funds in the city of Pittsburgh. As chairperson of Friends of Riverview Park, I am happy to see that funding for Davis Avenue Bridge, Bike Ped Bridge, is included in the proposed use of funds. As a member of the city's Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board, I'm also happy to see that the city is making investments in affordable housing programs, including $21 million for for-sale home ownership, $5 million for community land trust home ownership, $10 million for homeowner utility assistance program, and $5 million for protection of existing affordable rental housing. While these are good ideas for how to direct funds to help with affordable housing, I have to note that we need a lot more money to help those that have been hardest hit, low-wage families who rent. They were hardest hit. They are most at risk of losing their homes, yet most of the housing money is targeted to homeowners. I'm not advocating that you cut that home ownership, but that you need to find a way to pay for more funding for affordable rental housing. If there's $36 million that's allocated for homeownership, I think it'd be a great idea to find a way to do $36 million for rental, affordable rental housing. 5 years ago, the city identified a 20,000 unit shortage of homes that are affordable to our lowest wage families. 5 years later, housing has not gotten any cheaper, and the gap is as large or as it ever has been. We need to address that affordability crisis at the 30% of area median income level and below. That's a family of four making less than $20,000 a year. There are 20,000 families that are in that bucket. And I'm not sure if folks are making that connection, but there's a lot of help that's needed for low-wage tenants. This is a great opportunity, maybe once in a life opportunity to really significantly close that gap to help our most vulnerable residents. I am also urging council to take a more deliberative approach to this and maybe taking your time on those things that don't need to be spent right now to keep employees on the payroll to find a way to get additional public input into these programs. Thank you.
The next speaker is Linda McCarthy, followed by John Stephen.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, please state your name and neighborhood for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, Linda McCarthy, and I am a retired nurse from Allegheny General, and I live in District 1, the Observatory Hill area. And I am very pleased that we have $335 million of taxpayer dollars now allocated to our city to allow us to deal with the impact of the COVID and get some relief. And I think it's a very good idea that we pay our bills and keep people on track and make sure that those bills and those companies that we do business with are compensated. I'm very happy that we're going to be keeping our employees who are working, and it would seem that some of this money is also going towards capital projects. I think that that's a good way to consider some of the COVID relief, but there is still an impact of massive COVID-related hunger, food insecurity, and people are facing eviction and businesses are folding. I think council should consider getting more ideas from the community and for advocates on how to allocate this money to best meet the COVID-related trauma and economic impact, which takes us to the issue of, even though the guidance for this fund says that there should be extensive community input, what we have is these 2 Zoom meetings from what I can see, and then there's going to be a vote. And so I don't see that we have enough time for input to be reflected on this proposal. And I would like to think that council would consider allowing more time for input. There is a large amount of this money being given to outside organizations, many of which are very good. But for example, the URA, they have other sources of funds, and there's no accountability through the public. Through any elected process or representation. So we don't know how that money is going to be used or how it's going to be dealt with. So it can give the impression of having priorities or pet projects or favorites amongst the administration. One particular grant is $2.5 million to One Pittsburgh, which seems to be a private entity. And I don't believe that a private non-for-profit with exactly no track record, I don't know what they do, should get that amount of money. So I think, again, that needs reconsidered. The council is allocating money into 2024, a significant percentage of this, and yet the administration won't even be in office. So for a lot of those years, we won't have a good voice to say, maybe we should reconsider certain investments. Hopefully.
The next speaker is John Stephen, followed by Morton Brown.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Am I live?
Yes, please state your name and neighborhood for the record and then continue.
I am John Stephen, and I am speaking tonight as the coordinator for the Negley Run Watershed Task Force, intercommunity coalition working to advocate for a one water stewardship approach to address flooding and water quality in Pittsburgh's East End. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight, as this is a truly historic moment and decision for the city. The pandemic exposed the importance of investing in public health, and water is an essential part of quality, healthy communities. In fact, the Federal American Rescue Plan legislation that made these public funds available identified water and sewer infrastructure as one of the 4 basic use categories for these funds. But water quality and flood control are barely mentioned in the city's spending proposal. Yes, I commend the task force for allocating $20 million to get the lead out of Pittsburgh, whether it's a water line, lead water line replacement or other abatement approaches. But there are other additional critical surface water needs. In fact, the city is currently operating under a consent decree to eliminate sewage overflows and another consent agreement to update and improve its stormwater and flood mitigation program. Sewage in basements and localized flash flooding are a public health concern. And right now, PWSA is developing a stormwater program plan with a target early 2022 completion date. Why not identify some ARPA funds to be used to launch priority stormwater programming needs? I am sure that many of the identified capital projects or the allocation of URA program funding could be used to address flooding issues. But the task force proposal was developed with little transparency and such a rush that neither I nor anyone with the task force has any knowledge of whether that is being done or considered. For instance, community land trust and land banks have an important role to play in repurposing vacant and underutilized lots to serve, among other things, as stormwater sinks and sponges at the community scale. Will a portion of the 15 million proposed for those programs be used in that way? We have no way of knowing at this point. Similarly, a portion of the 6 million proposed for city land maintenance could be used to manage stormwater infrastructure and city rights of ways and parcels. May that be considered? We have no idea right now because we have so little information and been given so little time. So yes, replacing lost revenue and making sure city employees are paid needs to happen fast. But other aspects of this proposal for the future investments to build back resilience need more public involvement and dialogue. Please use a more transparent community process as part of the allocation of capital funds and the urban redevelopment programming funds as part of this ARPA process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Morton Brown, followed by Mark.
Morton Brown. Hi, Morton. Please
Hi.
state your name and neighborhood for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Morton Brown in the Brighton Heights neighborhood. I'm actually 2 doors down from where the Davis Avenue Bridge used to be. And obviously that's what I'm coming here to talk about today. And first, I'd like to just say I'm thankful and humbled by all of my fellow citizens that have been on here tonight talking about really important issues like affordable housing, land bank, and water quality. And I don't want to take anything away from what they're talking about, but I am wanting to put a plug in for restoring access to my neighborhood's park. It doesn't feel like my neighborhood's park and hasn't since 2009. I moved here in 2005, bought the house, had 1 child who was able to learn to ride a bike on that bridge when it was closed to vehicular traffic, but only open for pedestrian traffic after its initial inspection, which it had been that way for about 9 years. The bridge came down in 2009 and all the rest of my kids have to get into the car and drive all around the neighborhood to get to that park. And I still insist that that's our neighborhood park to our kids, and they sort of believe me. So we've noticed, I think, quite a decline in the quality of that park. Obviously, there's some natural issues and erosion affecting the roadway. We have a lot of beautiful deer that sometimes need to be taken care of and so forth. But I believe and I know from my time in city planning, actually, to cut off the life of a park is to cut off its access. If you can sort of imagine, if you've never been up in this neighborhood, Observatory Hill is on one side and Brighton Heights is on the other. That bridge was our only access. If you have to get into your car and drive 10 minutes to a park, it's not really your park. All neighborhood parks are our parks at that point. So as much as I do appreciate every other aspect of the funding, I do want to put in a passionate plea, if you will, for the Davis Avenue Bridge, because just like affordable housing, water quality, We need our way of life. We need our mental health. And that park has definitely given that to me and my family. And I thank you for your time and consideration on this important endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Next speaker is Mark Brentley, followed by Bill Taylor.
Good evening, council members. Hopefully you can hear me. Hello? Good
Yes,
evening.
good evening. Good evening. Please continue.
Yes, thank you. Mark Brentley, Senior, 14 Foster Square. I live on the north side. I want to say, first of all, thank you for technology. I am listening to you on my cell phone, and I'm watching you on YouTube. And I would like to take a moment to, first of all, thank Councilwoman Gross again for her comments last week publicly about the community involvement. Had she not made those comments, most of us would not have known about this. So once again, thank you. Secondly, to Madam Brenda Perez, I want to say to you, I love your background. I love your blouse, your shirt. That's Pittsburgh. And then to Councilwoman Teresa Kell, Council President Teresa Kell Smith, I would ask if at some point you can please share your timeline on this particular legislation, keeping in mind that council will be on vacation for the entire month of August. I am calling again as a former elected official, just encouraging you again to please stop this process. Here in Pittsburgh, we are already divided. We're divided by the poor communities are here, the Black communities are here, the wealthy folks are here, et cetera, et cetera. We do not need another issue to divide us. Secondly, I have been active all of my adult life in local neighborhood and community issues. And I can tell you, I have not heard of, nor have I received a note, letter, poster, or email about a meeting to determine a priority issue to move forward for these particular funds. But I'm constantly hearing funds allocated for the Davis Avenue Bridge. Not to say it is not an issue, but what role did the community play in selecting that issue as its priority? Secondly, if there was a meeting, could someone please forward to me the date of those meetings and those minutes and the process used to determine how it would move forward as a priority for those of us here on the north side? I am a strong believer that the conditions here in some of these communities are very bad. And so we need human investments. How can we change the lives and conditions for a lot of the folks who are living here? And finally, I would like to strongly urge and encourage Councilman Burgess as well as Councilman Lavelle. If we ever needed strong Black leadership, it is now. Things are happening all over these communities, and you represent.
Next speaker, please.
Rand Taylor, followed by Karen Gardner.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
In 1956, the city began the destruction of the lower hill, which caused 8,000 predominantly Black people to be displaced from the community. 1,300 businesses also went. In the late 20th century, the city illegally diverted $80 to $100 million of community development block grant dollars from needy communities to cover the fiscal mismanagement of the city. When the judge ruled that our one male, one female, one Black, one white police officer, and it was tossed in court, did the city attempt to try to fight to maintain a diverse police force and fire? No, they did not. They went along with it. We graduated years and years of all white police and fire. The destruction of East Liberty began in the 70s, where we began to see the original inhabitants of East Liberty and the high rises go up. And then 20 years later, that though the destruction of those communities, again, the displacement of thousands of African Americans. When the stadiums and the convention center was built, $1 billion of taxpayer dollars and African American businesses benefited not a bit from that. These were city policies, not the policies of racist financial institutions, but city policies. And we end up with the destruction of Penn Plaza. And as we've seen, 7,000 African Americans displaced from the city of Pittsburgh between 2014 and 2018, close to 10% of the Black population, done by city policies and voted on by this city council. Now we have a time to end the immoral, unjust situation that we exist in Homewood, while we address the many issues that we've talked about around home ownership and the lack of affordable housing for renters as well. So there should be a massive investment into housing in a place like Homewood, which we have the housing. As we know, the city is the largest slum landlord in Homewood. That as well is city policy. And so again, a massive investment. I disagree strongly with the model of development that Councilman Burgess did on Hamilton Avenue, but within months, 2 houses across the street from here were purchased in the area of $250,000 by speculators. But that shows you, if we invest on a whole block, there'll be people who will buy across the street. And how does the whole city benefit? Now there are tax revenues coming from the community of Homewood, which right now you see very little tax revenues coming. That is the right thing to do. That is the right thing to do with those children. Let's set the foundation, and then let's move to the county to talk about their 300,000, and let's move to the state to talk about that 14 billion. Let's bring forth a brand new Pittsburgh community. Those children of Homewood deserve it. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Karen Gardner, followed by Lee Freeman.
So much for the opportunity to speak with you. My name is Karen Gardner. I'm a resident of Point Breeze. I am a parent, the Pennsylvania manager for the Nationally Owned Farmers Council, and a member of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. I wanted to speak today to share my concern with the lack of local food system investment in the proposed allocations for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I work with growers and with food justice advocates from across Pennsylvania. During this pandemic, we watched as food insecurity increased, especially in places like Pittsburgh, where it was already high, and supply chain holes stressed farmers, food producers, and grocery stores. We also saw local farmers, community leaders, nonprofits, and business step up to make sure that food got to people who needed it. It's essential that we invest in our local food system. In my career, I've worked in local food policy in Pittsburgh, New Orleans, New York City, before returning here to my hometown. I've seen in every city that I've worked and that lived and worked and lived, I apologize, that dedicated investment into local food systems immensely improves the effectiveness and coordination of local food security work, local agriculture, and local food policy initiatives. I've also seen that when food systems investments are made with a focus on racial equity, local food systems are most effective at serving all residents. Our local food system needs investment to ensure that Pittsburghers are able to eat fresh, healthy, local food, and that local farmers, like the farmers I work with every day, have strong markets. These conditions create a thriving local food system, which lives on past its initial investment. This is why I support the establishment of a Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund with an investment of $10 million. This fund would increase our city's ability to produce food, support local food businesses, workers, and uplift community-led solutions to food insecurity. I encourage you to include Food Justice Fund in the allocations for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Thank you so much for your time, for holding this meeting, and for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Lisa Freeman, followed by Jennifer Englund. She's on, she's there.
Sorry, my name is Lisa Freeman. Good evening, counselors. I'm a resident of Manchester, and I'm advocating for the marginalized families here in Pittsburgh. The demographics for those aged 18 to 25, 40 to 65, and single with no children didn't get any additional benefits or limited benefits from the federal and all the additional assistance that they have been providing. In regards to holding the vote, not holding the vote, I would like to express that it's going to be a time of massive confusion, frantic, and despair come the end of September, when all these people who are unemployed, looking for housing, things are closing, what do I do? That those people are not on this call. So us who we are the advocates, and we have to speak on their behalf. This vote should go now. Those residents are going to need something in place to help them figure out that they're not going to suffer and it's the end of the world. One of your categories, I like your designations of your funding spent, but they should come with some mandates. First of all, your lost revenue, there's a little wiggle room in that area. Those of us who own homes and have been on time, and the renters who've been on time and sacrificed paying their rent and mortgage, well, we paid our rent and mortgage, but now we're due on city tax, homeowners, school. So can we use that or create some kind of fund to help those people who are not able to pay their taxes? And we could take that out, the lost revenue. Equity is a major concern of your Mayor Patuto, and he's screaming that loud, and I'm screaming it loud. Through those areas that you have designated, I would ask that there be a mandated place that those that receive those $2.5 million or whatever it is, that there be a set aside of 20% from each one of those groups that are receiving this money to go back, and they be the bridge to go back into the communities that they serve to develop partnership with the indigenous leaders so that there can be equity. And it's their onus and their charge to reach out and not be the usual suspects of getting all the money and then it never filtering down to the people that they serve. I think that would be equitable. The line item for the, I don't know which resolution was that, but food has not played a major role in that budget. And I agree with others that there should be a line item for $10 million to address food insecurity for our residents. And that there should be that fund available because the federal has given additional allotments and additional money for children in school and summer programming, but
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Jennifer Englund, followed by Casey McGill.
Hi, friends. My name is Jennifer Englund. I'm a resident of Morningside. I'm also the Senior Director of Partner Success at 412 Food Rescue and Food Rescue Hero. And I'm also the Secretary for the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. And I wanted to talk to you today about the city's proposed allocations for the American Rescue Plan Act funds, specifically advocating for a food justice fund. During the pandemic, not only did we see rates of food insecurity increase dramatically, but we also saw the devastating impact of a disruption in the food system. And for people facing food insecurity, the barriers were multiplied. However, we also witnessed so much innovation and resilience by communities and community leaders throughout the system. People working tirelessly to make sure that our communities were fed and that the food system survived. At 412 Food Rescue, we started home deliveries for people who could not get to a distribution site, and we invested in technology to make that process of home delivery sustainable, which we're now licensing in other cities. We partnered with efforts that both supported restaurants and fed people through several new projects, including our bus stop feeding project and our community takeout project. We were very proud to work with local businesses, with school districts, municipalities, and other nonprofits and community projects to innovate quickly to ensure that neighborhoods had continued access to fresh and healthy food throughout the pandemic. In fact, some of the most dynamic innovations happened at this community level. I'm looking at projects like Eat Initiative, and I heard Casey McGill is speaking next. The Pittsburgh Restaurant Mutual Aid Society did amazing work. It was just unbelievable how quickly they pulled together to address that need. This resiliency should be nurtured. Our food system needs investment to ensure that these businesses and other organizations are able to survive and that our communities are able to access fresh and healthy food. But the city plans for the ARPA funds, troublingly, don't really include a meaningful investment in our local food system. Investment which not only provides a bulwark against crisis, but also helps create thriving communities in the meantime. That's why I support the establishment of the Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund. I also would like to advocate that you involve the community in the process of figuring out how these funds are going to be allocated. It's really important that this is an equitable and people-centered process, and that the residents of the city and organizations that serve the communities have a voice in the development of the plan to spend these incredible funds. So I just want to go on record supporting the creation of a food justice fund and a equitable and community-centered process to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker, Casey McGill, followed by Karen Schaefer.
Hi, folks. Thank you so much for letting me speak. My name is Casey McGill. I'm a resident of Mount Washington and serve as the co-director and co-founder of Pittsburgh Restaurant Workers Aid. Pittsburgh Restaurant Workers Aid provides resources and community support to restaurant and hospitality workers who have lost financial, housing, food, and healthcare security. PRWA was built as a direct response to COVID-19 pandemic. The city of Pittsburgh will receive an estimated $335 million as part of the American Rescue Plan, which presents a huge opportunity to help working class folk during a period where they need it. I'm requesting a pause on the vote so the city of Pittsburgh can adequately ask for more public input and conduct outreach with the participation of existing organizations. We have the opportunity to spend critical funding on programming that can literally save thousands of Pittsburghers from homelessness and financial insecurity. Yet the most urgent needs of residents who have suffered the most through the pandemic seem to be shortchanged. Pittsburgh Restaurant Workers Aid echoes the concerns of many who have commented on this spending plan, and we are disappointed that it was developed behind closed doors without the input of organizations actively and effectively working with everyday residents. In many ways, this reflects a consistent trend of failing to reach vulnerable populations, which led to the continuation of Pittsburgh's long-standing inequities. Housing inequality, wage issues, and affordable healthcare options are overarching issues facing the city of Pittsburgh as a whole and our region at large. Outreach methods, if they are employed at all, are outdated. The city needs to be more responsive to social and economic changes that Pittsburgh and other cities across the nation are undergoing, which predated the pandemic but has been magnified by it. Organizations like PRWA and many others who have already spoken out against this spending plan build and maintain relationships with vulnerable, transient community members. And we urge the city to do a better job of engaging with the population who are most in need of the relief the American Rescue Plan can provide, who needed the relief before the American Rescue Plan even existed. The city of Pittsburgh has the opportunity to develop and maintain a people-centered process. Many organizations at this hearing are asking for a similar goal, for you to hear the concerns of our residents instead of basing your plan on what you assume working folk want in their communities. We echo their concern, but add a request for the city itself to invest in their outreach methods, so in the future they can listen to not only organizations actively working in communities, but to the actual residents who will be affected by large-scale change. We are just another voice in the choir that is asking you, for the sake of the people in the city that need it the most, please do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Karen Schaefer, followed by Jacqueline Hill.
I don't see them on here. Do you?
She's not there, Kim.
Neither.
Neither
Next.
one.
I don't see either.
Okay. Okay. Speaker is Lane, followed by Lauren Connolly.
Could you say the name one more time, Kim, please?
Betty Lane, followed by Lauren Connolly.
Eddie Lane?
Betty's not there either.
Oh, Betty. Oh, Betty Lane.
Eddie Lane and
Oh,
Lauren.
yeah. I don't see Miss Lane on here.
Yeah, Lauren is on, but Betty is not there.
Okay. Miss Lane's not on. Let's go to Lauren, please.
Hi, good evening. I'd like to thank Mayor Peduto, I'm Lauren Connolly. I'm here as the Executive Director of Lawrenceville Corporation. Lawrenceville Corporation is located at 143rd Street in Lawrenceville. And our organization is dedicated to serving as a catalyst and conduit for growth and reinvestment in the Lawrenceville community. I'm also a Lawrenceville resident. I'd like to thank Mayor Peduto and his administration, as well as all of you in City Council and all of the city departments and agencies who have served on the front lines in the wake of COVID-19. And thank you for your work in bringing these critical relief funds to Pittsburgh. I'm here tonight to echo many of my colleagues from communities across the city who have already provided testimony and have requested that there be a more open, inclusive, and transparent process around the prioritization and allocation of these funds. It's unclear how these projects and allocations have been prioritized, and the allocation plan lacks detail in how those dollars will be invested or operationalized. We welcome much needed investment in land recycling efforts and in addressing lead in our communities in housing and in home repairs. But what does this allocation break down to be, especially as it relates to some of the funds being allocated towards city, PWSA, URA programmatic operations? Many of those questions have not been answered. Although our communities, including Lawrenceville, are in need of infrastructure and capital investment, we acknowledge that these funds should be allocated to address those communities most impacted through the pandemic first, and those needs that have only been exacerbated by COVID and in the wake of COVID. We are experiencing a housing crisis. We don't have enough housing, affordable, accessible housing for our neighbors. These funds should be used to deepen the affordability available to those in most need, to support the community land trust models, the affordable rental housing, renters. People need to be supported with resources, food access, eviction diversion, tenant support, and other health and wellness supports. Small businesses. There's clearly no shortage of need, and you all do not have an easy job here. But given the intent of these funds, funds should be prioritized for the most vulnerable, and those most impacted deserve an opportunity to weigh in on how these funds can best address their needs. If these funds are truly to lay the foundation for a strong and equitable recovery, then the fund should be allocated as part of a fair and equitable process, a process that addresses the inequities that we all point to each and every day in our work. We've heard some great ideas, requests, recommendations coming out of these hearings, and thank you to Council for convening these. But these ideas and requests deserve to be contemplated, considered, and discussed in a real way and as part of a robust and comprehensive open community process. And we hope that you all will work to ensure that the public is given a chance to weigh in on the allocation of these funds, as has been the case in many other cities. Thank you for your time and for all that you do.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Jamie Christian, followed by Raul Ambrutori.
Jamie Christian is on. Jamie, please turn your mic off. Please unmute your mic. Press *6. Jamie Christian. Could you please unmute your mic? Thank you.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Please,
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry about that. Good evening, esteemed council members. My name is Jamie Christian. I am the founder and executive director of Let Us Turn Up the Beat Sustainability Collective. Excuse me. And I'm also a member of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. Pardon me. Thank you for this opportunity and your time. We're a 501c3 that has provided sustainability education programs to schools and communities within the city of Pittsburgh and surrounding neighborhoods for the past 6 years. Our programs address social, environmental, and economic sustainability with a strong emphasis on agriculture, nutrition, and local food systems. Our community outreach program was created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. With the help of volunteers, local businesses, farms, and other nonprofits, and also a small and mighty grant from the Pittsburgh Foundation, we've been able to successfully deliver over 90,000 pounds of food to hundreds of households who have faced food insecurity throughout the pandemic. We also distribute personal care items and garden supplies, excuse me, and have made our education programs available at no cost to children in the Pittsburgh area, many of whose parents are displaced food systems workers, single parents, and who were economically disadvantaged prior to the pandemic. I would like to take this opportunity to talk to you today about the city's proposed allocations for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. The lack of investment in our local food system and the proposed allocations are disheartening and frankly quite alarming. During the pandemic, food insecurity rose, and our city, like many, was at the mercy of the 4 corporations that control 80% of the meat that we consume and large factory farms that supply big box stores. They could not deliver. But you know who could? Our local rural and urban farmers, excuse me, our butchers, our restaurants, our local businesses, and nonprofits. Our local food system needs investment to ensure that our farms, organizations, businesses, and nonprofits like mine are able to survive, and that everyone has access to fresh, healthy food. My organization's newest initiative, Native Nosh Co-op and Kitchen, provides a platform for new, small, and marginalized farmers within our local food system to sell their products to the public and connect with local restaurants and food purveyors. Additionally, we're providing an opportunity for struggling food service providers to partner with Native Nosh in producing reduced oxygen packaged meals, which can be purchased alongside farm goods with SNAP and other currency. This pandemic has exposed the loose stitches in our seams of our food system, which have now become big gaping holes. To mend those holes, there also needs to be an investment in programs that will positively change our economic, agricultural, and social infrastructures. Agricultural by providing funding to urban farms, community gardens, and food hubs, as well as education programs to promote farming on a smaller scale. Social infrastructure by providing funding for sustainability-based education programs with curriculum that boosts neuroplasticity through better nutrition and increased physical activity. Our children have spent over a year behind computers, not reading from text, not writing with a pencil, not interacting with their peers. These activities are essential for healthy brain development in areas that control cognition, executive function, and reward-seeking behaviors. Our work and the work of others in our food system is why I support the establishment of the Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund with an investment of $10 million. This fund will increase our city's ability to produce food, support food businesses and workers, and uplift community-led solutions.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Raul Amrutapuri, followed by Alan Hart.
Raul?
Yeah.
Yes, hi.
Thank you.
Please state your name and neighborhood for the record, please.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, council members. I am Rahul Amrutapuri, a resident of Morningside. I am here today to express my opposition to the way decisions around the American Rescue Plan funds have been made and some of the line items that have been included within the allocations. In not involving the public while developing the expenditure plan and by having the public hearings after the decisions have already been made, I believe is not in the right spirit of responding to the COVID-19 emergency. Some of the fund allocations, I believe, do not help to fulfill the objectives of the American Rescue Plan, which specifically states the purpose of the funds is to support the immediate economic stabilization for the households and addressing systemic public health and economic challenges. I also oppose spending the funds on some of the URA and capital projects, which really might not contribute to helping families and communities recover from the impacts of the pandemic. To correct this, I request the council to not only ensure greater and adequate public participation in deciding how the funds should be spent, but also using the funds for relieving the burden of many residents of the city who are still suffering from the fallouts of the pandemic, and also ensuring that there is enough and more than enough support for families and communities that are affected the most. This can take the form of support for many of the issues that other speakers have spoken about today. Doing so will serve the actual purpose of the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is to support households, small businesses, impacted industries, essential workers, and the communities hardest hit by the crisis. I conclude by asking the council not to table the use of the American Rescue Plan funds as currently planned. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Alan Hart, followed by Carol Harderman.
Alan Hart?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please state
Hi,
your
my
name.
name is
and
Alan.
business.
My name is Alan Hart. I live in Stanton Heights. I'm a 71-year-old retired trade unionist. I'm not here representing any organization that's seeking funds or has any stake in any of the priorities being discussed, but I want to say that I applaud most of the speakers before me for bringing up priorities and needs that are being neglected in this process. I'm also not going to thank council for holding this hearing. I think that's your job, and I don't think you're doing it very well. I think this process has been shameful. A lame duck mayor and 3 members of council have come up with a plan which is now slated to be rushed through for a rubber stamp vote this week. This is not democracy. This is not due process. This is not what Americans thought they signed up for. I will thank one member of council, the one who usually stands up against the herd mentality on this council, and that's my member of council. So I want to thank Ms. Gross for her role again. I just want to say, I'm going to be very brief because I don't want to get cut off mid-sentence like you've done to so many other speakers. So I'll just end by telling you to do three things: pause the vote, stop the rush, and practice democracy.
Next speaker, please.
Carol Hardiman.
Good evening. My name is Carol Hardiman. I am a longtime Hill District resident. I am the executive director of Hill District Consensus Group, and I'm also a representation of my African-American ancestors that were made to build this great country and city. As a longtime resident of Pittsburgh and a taxpayer, I am calling on you today to pause the American Rescue Plan vote until community people, Black and brown people in particular, are properly engaged. This public money is very crucial and a good step forward in hopes that equity and equality will be achieved here in Pittsburgh. We cannot afford to rush this process due to former recovery funds that only produce unfair practices, discriminatory treatment, inequity, opportunities, and poor outcomes in Black and brown communities, despite our ancestors' historical accomplishments. Rather than quickly voting for Mayor Peduto's line item bailout plans, I am calling on City Council to partner with grassroots organizers with lived experience, stakeholder and resident-led organizations that are already working to improve and advance our community. Together, we can help you prioritize a unbiased recovery plan that speaks to affordable housing, anti-displacement plans, food apartheid, quality education, environmental justice, people-centered programming needs, and so much more. Finally, the media continues to suggest that Pittsburgh is the most livable city to the world, but what the media does not report is the lack of investment in development strategies that has never offered a fair and equitable approach for Black and brown people to thrive and rise here in Pittsburgh. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Ziggy Edwards, followed by Laquib Ajamu.
Good evening. My name is Ziggy Edwards. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thanks. My name is Ziggy Edwards and I live in the Run. This past Saturday, I made my general statement about Mayor Peduto's unconscionable anti-democratic plan to set the spending plan for $335 million in American Rescue Plan funds with zero public input, and after being voted out by the people he refused to represent. I'm back tonight with a short response to 2 speakers out of the dozens I heard at Saturday's meeting who called for the outgoing mayor's plan to be rushed through on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, because the plan includes rebuilding the Davis Avenue Bridge in Brighton Heights. I just wanted to point out that the plan also includes a major improvement in my neighborhood, namely fixing the extremely dangerous conditions along Irvine Street in Hazelwood, Greenfield. I've been advocating these repairs for years, as Councilman O'Connor knows, yet I'm still calling out this plan, and in particular, the efforts to warp speed it through as ill-conceived at the very least. I feel confident that the Irvine Street repairs can survive as part of a plan that includes the informed input and support of my fellow Pittsburghers. The need for these repairs in my community is clear, and I will continue advocating for them as long as they don't come at the expense of my neighbors' basic needs like food, housing, and transportation. From what I heard, my Brighton Heights neighbors made a strong case for rebuilding the bridge in their community as well. As I said before, our communities know their own needs better than anyone, and we can address those needs, but this plan is not a good way forward. The phrase, "don't let the ends justify the means," is a cliche because it's correct. In the end, our means are all we have. And in Pittsburgh, we have to decide whether we're willing to push for real democracy, because we live in a time of many unattractive alternatives. Council members, the vast majority of your constituents have had less than 1 week to review and understand Mayor Peduto's proposed edict, and some may still not even know it exists or that it's about to be put to a vote. We've had 3 minutes each at 2 public meetings to respond. This process cannot truthfully be called public engagement, which is why I'm again asking City Council to stop the vote on these ARP resolutions and invest in Pittsburghers' needs with their direct input. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Raqib Jamu Asbaro.
Hello?
Hi,
Yes.
please state your name and neighborhood for the record.
Rockweed Bay, the Lower Hill District, 5th Avenue. I'm the founder and executive director of the Black Urban Gardeners and Farmers of Pittsburgh, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Black growers and food justice advocates in the city of Pittsburgh. We're a grassroots organization that came together to bring a collective group of Black growers to work together to solve challenges that we face here in Pittsburgh as Black growers. And here I am again addressing these issues. We have been working together with partners for many years to tackle the issue of food justice in our community. We're also food sovereignty activists as well, who work in food apartheid areas and we want to end this uppermost important issue that prevails in Black community, such as Homewood and the Hill District, to name a few. Most of you are familiar with the term food desert. However, that's a homespun word to downplay the crisis of food insecurities in our community. We use the word food apartheid because it describes Black and brown neighborhoods that are oppressed already, that don't have access to healthy food. I know several of my colleagues have spoken on the importance of using these funds for food security and housing. It's used a redundancy. This money can help truly make Pittsburgh a livable city for all, not just the elite. Food cooperative grocery stores are needed in Homewood, the Hill, and other underserved communities that has been neglected for too long. As a Black woman living here, faced with the realities that this city is the most challenging in the country, for Black women like myself, it's an abomination to those who often forget or do not care about the disparities of Black women like myself and others who are challenged with these inequities. Women dying during childbirth, not being able to feed their families adequate, low income wages. If you really want to make a difference in apartheid across the board in the city of Pittsburgh with these funds, you have the opportunity to do that, especially for Black and brown people. As the Shade Tree Commissioner, which I'm grateful to serve, I can say that fruit trees does not solve this problem either. We need a food justice fund and a tangible economic low-income housing fund led by those who are mostly affected by this, Black people, especially those who live in these food apartheid area and are doing this work boots on the ground. Our organization, working with other organizations, are already in the process of leading a community food cooperative grocery store in the Homewood area and also the Hill District. And this is a green print we created that can be used as a model in other communities as well. I'm appalled that your plan does not include food sovereignty, because we all need to eat and find a solution to end the disparities that we as Black women face here in Pittsburgh. We were dealing with food insecure households long before COVID, and we continue to help. More so ever, that these plans were made without community input. No one should have to go shopping outside their community for fresh produce.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Diana Barron, followed by Jenny Hildebrand.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Diana Barron. I go by Charlie. I'm a resident of Squirrel Hill. After reviewing the proposed ARPA funds allocation and listening to everybody speak tonight, I really recognize how tough it is to allocate all of these funds and cover all of the needs that we have in Pittsburgh. But that is exactly why I hope you will delay the vote and open up the decision process so more people can give input on how the ARPA funds will be allocated. With so many essential issues at stake and a finite amount of money, we need to have more time and more involvement in making these tough decisions. Some of my priorities for how I hope these funds are allocated include emergency fare relief for public transit. With the proposed fare increase coming up from Port Authority, that's especially going to hurt cash riders who are already some of our poorest transit riders. They really need relief. So hopefully we can allocate some funds to keeping public transit accessible to everybody, for example, by showing an EBT card when you board the bus and getting free fares. As has been said very well by a bunch of previous speakers, we also need to support farmers at the same time as we support our neighbors with food insecurity. I personally benefit a lot from the farmers market program that gives people extra funds when we use our EBT card at the farmers market. And I really appreciate that so much, but I think we can expand further in ways that support both people who need access to fresh food and our local farmers. In a previous state I lived in, we had a program where you could apply for and receive subsidy on a CSA. So farmers would get funds up front and then we could be guaranteed fresh food for the whole season. As it was just said, this is a huge racial justice issue. The disparity in Pittsburgh is really astounding and appalling, and anything we can do to make sure that people are getting access to fresh food is really important. I want to commend the allocations I've seen for affordable housing, but also as has been said, we need more to go towards rent assistance for people who are still hurting and facing eviction. Long-term affordable housing is crucial to address, but I also want to echo what Pittsburgh is, or what people have said about Pittsburgh having more affordable rental housing specifically. There's many line items in the proposed allocation that I'm excited about and support, but without more details about how this money is exactly going to be spent, it's hard for us to decipher why the funds are allocated in certain ways. Please open up the process and delay the vote so that more of us can participate and see the details of exactly how these funds will affect us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Jenny Hildebrand, followed by Alyssa Grishman.
I do not see Jenny Hildebrand.
Jenny's not available. Alyssa.
Alyssa? I see her now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi. Please state your name and neighborhood for the record. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, my name is Elisa Grishman. I'm a disability rights advocate and a proud resident of Uptown. You can't tell over a videoless webcast meeting, but I have a lot of tattoos. Flowers, butterflies, birds, sheep, you name it. But the most important of all is wrapped around my left wrist. It symbolizes an iron manacle with chains coming off of it. The text inside reads, "Nothing about us without us." Those words are powerful. While in recent years in America, they have become the rallying call specifically for the disability rights movement, their broader meaning is still understood by all, and versions of this can be seen in such things as DC's taxation without representation license plates. I'm here today because City Council is doing just that by voting on a measure to appropriate funding from the American Rescue Plan, quote unquote, for the citizens of Pittsburgh without allowing for substantial public input on what our needs actually are. They're acting about us without us. I understand that it is the job of City Council to act in the best interests of its constituents, and that for the majority of business conducted by them, there isn't a need for public comment periods or focus groups. But this is big, once in a lifetime big. What council decides on will reshape the face of Pittsburgh, and to do that without letting Pittsburghers, especially marginalized Pittsburghs, have a voice in what's happening is damaging at best and deadly at worst. As I said earlier, I live in Uptown, a neighborhood that's currently going through a huge amount of flux because of projects like the BRT that have been pushed through without truly listening to the concerns of citizens. As a result, low-income, disabled, and Black and brown residents, many of whom who have lived here for generations, are being forced out of their homes and communities to make way for a form of progress that hasn't allowed for their voices to be heard. Being one of the gentrified cities in the country is not something to be proud of. Does City Council want to do that to all of Pittsburgh? Because that is not how a democracy works. This is meant to be a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. So be that government, stop this vote today, open a public comment period, and actually listen to what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Shaman Tomai, followed by Helen Gerhardt.
Thank you. And I see Sherman is on the line.
Greetings. My title is Shaman Pomai Chakmam Yahalahi. I'm a council member of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aboriginal American People, and excluding Indians not taxed. I'm not new to City Council. We are not concerned with fiat currency. We are concerned with stewardship of our lands and our resources. And to put our story here into perspective, the original Hill, East Liberty, Larmer, Homewood, and East Hills, etc., was founded by our ancestors who were classified back then as so-called Negroes and colored, which are code words used for the word Indian. And thanks to the Racial Integrity Act created by Walter Ashby Pleckard, this is where that came from. So I stand in solidarity with the people who identify as Black and African American as it relates to ending food apartheid, and to create access, to remove barriers, and increase the sovereignty of these people. The Pittsburgh City Charter expresses Pittsburgh City municipal government's municipal officers are sworn by oath to the Constitution and to our people, and our demands are paramount for our posterity. We need to have clean water. We need access to water. We need to remove all the barriers to food injustices. We must provide, and you must provide, for the reclamation and demarcation and the restoration of all of our property. Removing all barriers to our rights, to our lands, to our territories and our resources, and demarcation from PWSA and gas and the energy that is being siphoned out of our lands. The city must work with our people according to our cultural customs and traditions for our water, our permaculture, our stormwater management, our food forests, and all land stewardship and our traditions. Food must be growing everywhere where it is available to the people to eat without cost. That is our mission and that is our goal, and that is very doable. There's many places and spaces of lands that are within these territories that can be turned into these wonderful plush food forests with water catchment systems and irrigation systems and trails. And this is the duty and the obligation of your council, as well as your city municipal officers and all of your entities. So I stand for the people who have spoke before me. I, as an Aborigine, as the true indigenous, the ones who are the true stewards and owners of these lands, must be in these conversations that will determine the outcome for generations to come. For this land is our land, and our food must be growing everywhere, and we must not be limited to it because of bureaucracy and red tape. I yield.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Speaker is Helen Gerhardt, followed by Jay Ting Hua.
Thank you for considering the concerns of so many people on this call. I spoke as an individual at the last hearing. Tonight, I speak on behalf of the Pittsburgh Human Rights City Alliance, a network of human rights advocates and organizations. We remind City Council members that this council made a decision in April of 2011 to use a human rights framework to guide its policies. We urge you to stop the vote on the Peduto administration's proposed allocation of American Rescue Plan Act funds to make space for a transparent, inclusive process that enables participation by residents and a more thoughtful consideration of our community's needs and human rights. We should be directing these funds to building the social and physical infrastructure to help care for and protect those whose voices are marginalized by the compound impacts of systemic racism, social exclusion, and economic exploitation. We want to remind this council of the following reports and recommendations that come out of the city itself that have highlighted priorities and needs requiring close attention in the process of allocating ARPA funds. The city's Gender Equity Commission has produced a number of key reports and recommendations, including the 2019 analysis, Pittsburgh's inequality across gender and race. We remind all listeners here that on the eve of this pandemic in December 2019, Pittsburgh City Council signed an ordinance declaring racism a public health crisis, recognizing that the health of all residents depend upon targeted efforts to eliminate racial health gaps. And 2020 definitely proved that racism was deadly in this pandemic. In April of 2020, the same commission produced Building an Equitable New Normal, which identified urgent needs exposed with this pandemic and called on the city to embed a gender analysis in budgeting decisions and planning, and to prioritize resources for women, girl, trans, and gender diverse people. The Gender Equity Commission and the Commission on Human Relations, through a series of community forums, assessed human rights in this region. This was the basis of a report to the United Nations with a pretty damning title, Racial Inequity at the Core of Human Rights Challenges in Pittsburgh, documenting the damages of those inequities and democratic deficits. Convened by the city's Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations, the Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing Task Force were developed after 2 years of intensive community process and addressed critical barriers and disparities in access to housing that have
Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Jiting Walk, followed by Cohen.
Thank you. I don't see Jiting on my sheet. Is he on yours?
No, he's not there. And nor is Claire. I think the next speaker available is going to be Paul O'Hanlon.
Is Paul on?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Paul. How are you? Please state your name and neighborhood, please.
Okay. My name is Paul O'Hanlon. I'm the co-chair of the City County Task Force on Disabilities, and I live in the Regent Square neighborhood. I really, the choice here is, do I talk about process or do I talk about priorities? And I just want to say that this is a process that doesn't really work to talk about priorities in 3 minutes. The scope of the pandemic is so sweeping, and the consequences and impact is so dramatic that to really try to summarize in 3 minutes what our priorities are, I think is impossible. So I want to talk about the process. And I think that we really need to have a community process. I think that we need to come up with ground rules. And one of the ground rules that I would recommend is that when the city gets money, that's really, we're getting it because people were injured, we shouldn't be spending that on things that should come out of our general taxes. You know, so if we've got some long project that's been on the books for years, that's not the kind of thing that we should be robbing from people who have been injured, the money that's coming down really for them. We shouldn't be diverting it to these other public purposes. So I think that we really should have a public process that allows for the public to come forth with needs. Just as an example, I don't know how many families lost their automobiles over the course of the pandemic, and that transit and getting to jobs is different than it was pre-pandemic. I think that there's so many aspects of this pandemic that we don't fully understand yet, that we really should spend more time deciding how to spend this money. So that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
We're going to go back to J. Ting Walker.
Oh, I see him. He's on. J. Ting Walker, please.
Hi.
Hi.
My
Could
name
you
is
name and neighborhood for the record, please?
Sure. My name is J. Ting Walker. I'm the vice chair of the Green Party of Allegheny County and the volunteer coordinator on the Connor Mulvaney for City Council District 4 campaign. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on how our city's ARPA funds should be used. I agree with many of the other speakers that the amount of public input we've seen so far is not enough. The proposal for the use of this money should not be coming as a surprise to residents. We knew this money was coming. Residents had been testifying on how the ARPA money should be used since at least the May 5th resident-led city council public hearing on Black residents being displaced from Pittsburgh. We should not have had to wait until July, right before a vote for city council, to host a public discussion as a city on how the money should be spent. Pittsburgh's Democratic voters just strongly indicated that they don't want to continue with the current administration. It'd be a mistake for the current administration to call the shots on allocating all of the funding. The mandate is clearly not there for it. Now on to how the funds themselves should be used. I urge City Council to review the May 5th hearing testimony because it contained many public comments about how the ARPA funds should be used, including my own, months before this current proposal came out. The message that came through loud and clear from dozens of speakers was that the funding should be used to address housing insecurity in our city. Some of the outgoing mayor's proposals are dedicated to housing, but more of it should be to better reflect our housing crisis. I know that part of the hurry is to prevent city staff layoffs. I think you could make a strong case for allocating those funds with a sped up process without trying to rush through allocating the rest of the funding. As for the rest of the funds, I understand that it'd be a mistake to save them all for a rainy day. As we know, it's raining right now and it's raining a lot. We need to deploy these funds as soon as we can, but that does not mean skipping out on building the consensus required for good government. It does not mean knowing what's best for our residents without consulting them. We need to delay the vote on how the ARPA funds should be delayed until a community process can occur. As for the funds itself, we need to allocate a much larger portion of those funds to housing issues. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Carl Redwood, followed by Laura Chu Weens.
Thank you. Mr. Redwood? I don't see him on here.
He's
Do you
not
have
here. Yeah, Carl or Laura Chu.
Laura Chu?
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Laura Chu Weens. I'm the director of Pittsburghers for Public Transit. Our office is located at 5119 Penn Avenue in Garfield. I am, like other speakers today, appalled by the rushed budgeting of hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer relief money and the absent public process that has resulted in this budget. These funds do not need to be obligated until December 31st, 2024, more than 3 years from now. By front-loading all this spending and putting it towards regular capital expenses, this administration is irreversibly harming our presumptive mayor's ability to support a recovery. Tens of millions towards building sustainability upgrades, updating streetlights, and electrifying the city's vehicle fleet. That's not the intent of the emergency federal relief money. These are the types of uses that will be funded in the federal infrastructure package, which is being negotiated as we speak, or are purchases that should be made as part of the annual city budget. Even the Irvine 2nd Avenue sidewalk replacement that we have been at the forefront of advocating for should not be funded from emergency relief money. Instead, it should come from the $14 million that DOMI has already received to pay for the already obsolete monoclin connector. This past weekend, DOMI unveiled the Move PGH initiative and talked about universal basic mobility for all Pittsburgh residents. Of this goal, we at PPT agree with DOMI. We believe that mobility is a right and that the city has an important role to play in ensuring that to be the case. But the administration's idea of universal mobility isn't that universal. Scooters and zip cars are inaccessible to those that need mobility most, those with young children, people with disabilities, youth, seniors. The private companies that Pittsburgh is relying on to provide this universal mobility are out for profit, and that has resulted in the mobility hubs being clustered in white and affluent neighborhoods. As part of Move PGH, the Port Authority will have a trial period of giving out just 100 people transit passes. Contrast that with what transit riders have been calling for since the outset of the pandemic, for just $4 to $8 million of emergency relief money to allow low-income riders to show their EBT cards to board transit for free for a year. 75% of Port Authority trips begin or end in the city, so the city would be an appropriate source of these funds. That is universal basic mobility, to have unlimited access to transportation for all low-income residents, not just in the city, but in the county, for less than the cost of the proposed streetlight upgrades. Wouldn't that be transformative? Wouldn't that provide desperately needed relief to city residents and stimulate jobs and food access and fewer missed healthcare appointments for those who have been hardest hit by the pandemic? We firmly support all the other powerful proposals that need to be funded, like robust support for renters, funding for CLTs, the $10 million Food Justice Fund. These are the types of proposals that should be solicited from a true public process and funded from the American Rescue Plan. That would be key to a real recovery that centers and uplifts those most harmed. I urge Council to delay the vote and hold a truly people-centered process, and that lifts up the needs and voices of Black and Brown Pittsburgh residents above all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The next speaker is Jessica Benner, followed by Carl Arnold.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Benner, and I live in Friendship. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I believe there is more work to be done before a vote on how to allocate this money can take place. The Treasury Department explicitly guided localities who are receiving this money to use an open process to, quote, engage their constituents and communities in developing plans to use these payments. To engage their constituents and communities in developing plans to use these payments, given the scale of funding and its potential to catalyze broader economic recovery and rebuilding, end quote. The American Rescue Funds are a substantial investment in our city, and we deserve the opportunity to provide input on how it's spent. There are many community groups and citizens within the city who know the effects of the pandemic and have developed plans and ideas on what is needed to help our most affected residents bounce back from the hardships of the past year and a half. Why aren't these groups being directly consulted? Why hasn't the Pittsburgh Recovery Task Force offered mechanisms to receive feedback from residents in accordance with the Treasury Department's open process stipulation? To date, there has been no community input into the process other than the meeting held this past Saturday and this meeting today. These two meetings were announced with only 5 days of notice, and the public detail on the city's plan for allocating these substantial and transformative funds for our city is just a spreadsheet with little to no description for allocations of millions of dollars. This isn't a plan. There was no justification available. There are no details provided. I urge you to delay the vote today until more work can be done to gain input from residents and community groups on how their communities could benefit from this money, and until the task force or others provide the public with more details on how these funds will be allocated in an equitable way. I urge you to create a real plan for community input consistent with Treasury guidance. This should include accessible hearings, more opportunities for community engagement, feedback, and input, and genuine dialogue with city leaders, not just these 3-minute comment slots. I urge you to learn more about the inequities within our city that aren't being covered by the proposed spending plan, like at least $10 million for food justice, $8 million for emergency fare relief for public transit, and at least $36 million for additional assistance to renters. So I urge you to delay the vote until an open process where all residents contribute to improving our city with these historic funds, and ensure these funds will be spent to the benefit of those households, businesses, and nonprofits in the communities most disproportionately affected by the pandemic, which is the purpose of these funds. Thank you.
May we have the next speaker, please? The next speaker is Carl Arnold, followed by Tim Stevens.
Hello, my name is Carla Arnold. I am a resident of Perry Hilltop on the north side. And as so eloquently the previous speakers have spoken, I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I thank you so much for giving me a voice to make a comment. And my comment is around, I see that you have all these line items that are for housing, which is great, which is for like gas, water, sewage. But I didn't see anything regarding food. So I'm with most of the people who have made comments about the Food Justice Fund. I would like to see a specific line item for food. and some of the insecurities that we face in some of our communities. So with the American Rescue Plan, you're getting $335 million. I think there's room for food. I think there's room for helping people with rent disparities. And I think there's room for public transportation. Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Tim Stevens.
We on?
Yes.
Okay, good. On behalf of the Black Political Empowerment Project Planning Council, I'm urgently requesting that City Council of Pittsburgh delay any vote on proposed use of the $335 million coming into the coffers of Pittsburgh from the American Rescue Plan until there is a much expanded opportunity for input into the decision-making process. This amount of federal dollars is not an everyday occurrence, and the method by which these funds are appropriated should be done in a very deliberate and careful fashion and with great input from the citizenry of Pittsburgh. This process should not be rushed or even appear to be rushed. City Council should wish to be viewed as providing the citizens of Pittsburgh with a wide open opportunity for input into such an important and historic process. Optics aren't everything, but they are important to gaining and maintaining the trust of the public. With this amount of funds on the line, transparency should be a top priority. The fact that the city will be initiating a process that will take the city of Pittsburgh into 2024 is all the more reason for enhanced citizen participation. So many areas of need for our city, including the healing, the historical damage done over the years to our Black and poor communities with regard to meeting the need for a significant explosion in creating new quality, low to moderate income housing, for our significantly expanding the possibility and probability of success for African-American, minority, and women-owned businesses, attack to the continued challenges of climate change, more investment into our community organizations, the expansion of social services, anti-violence initiatives, community centers, support for more recreational opportunities for our youth, expanding workforce development services, adding strength to our local health services, particularly for African-American women who have been suffering from inadequate and disparate health services over the decades. In addition, we support a full examination to address the need for additional investments in the food challenges of our insecure people in our city and support expanded access to public transportation. It's important to note, whoever wins the mayoral election in November, there will be a new administration. That administration should be given the maximum opportunity for input into this important process going forward. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts.
The next speaker is Ann Sanders, followed by William Parker.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Ann Sanders. I am an Observatory Hill resident and the public policy advocate at Just Harvest, which works countywide to address the root causes of hunger. The American Rescue Plan allows the city to make transformative investments to address longstanding inequities and improve the overall financial stability of city residents. This is truly a historic opportunity for our city. As a homeowner, the city is our home. As a personal homeowner, I have a list of home improvement projects that I need to tackle at some point in time. But if someone gave me a large sum of money, my plans would not necessarily be to do those small home improvement projects. My plans would change. I would reprioritize. The current plan that we see before us looks like the list of projects that the city has had before them that has needed to be done for a long time. But if there's one thing the last year has taught us, it's that our plans and priorities often need to change. We can't afford to lose this historic opportunity to transform our city. While the administration has made recommendations that address some of these needs, such as dedicated funding for a handful of neighborhoods where there's been historic disinvestment, this process needs to be much more deliberative and inclusive to members of the public. The interim final rule put forth by the U.S. Treasury states that funds have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024. The federal guidance is clear that they expect there to be a community input process and that the kinds of projects that ARPA money can be spent on may take years to finish. In other words, the city does have time to decide where the needs are. City Council should, at the very least, take the upcoming recess to ask their constituents to help identify unmet needs that would help the city recover and springboard the city towards a more equitable and just community. At Just Harvest, we see huge inequities in healthy food access. Many neighborhoods still are food apartheid neighborhoods where there is nowhere within a mile to access healthy, fresh food. We strongly support the use of ARPA funds to create the Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund that would address food apartheid, support food entrepreneurship, assist new and beginning farmers, especially farmers of color, and secure financial support for community food systems development. The city should also work with the county to improve access to transit for low-income residents. Lack of access to transportation is one of the key barriers to getting and keeping a job, and is the second largest barrier to accessing food, second only to affordability. Fair relief is one key way to address the negative impacts of the pandemic. I urge council to pause voting on this resolution until a more equitable and public process can be held. Thank you.
The next speaker is William Parker, followed by Claudia Pierre.
Hello, everyone. I just want to first thank all of the speakers who took the time out to just come up with a speech and deliver it in such a passionate way. I'm hoping that all the city council members are listening. They have their ears wide open. Okay, I want to say we have to take time to consider what our communities want as a whole. I've listened to every speaker last Saturday, and I heard, and we all heard what they had to say. Echo upon echo, the message was clear. This outrageously short notice isn't fair. I understand some residents may see projects in this proposal that benefit their community. For example, the Davis Bridge. Listen, I'm from the north side. I would love to see the bridge rebuilt, but we have to make sure it's done in an equitable way, just like every other future project. Residents who oppose the vote aren't saying they're against anything. They're saying, let's hear more from the public, that's all. We haven't even received the second check yet. If we have to wait on that money, why can't we wait to decide how we're going to spend it? I got a chance to view most of the city council members' social media pages, and I haven't even seen too many mentions about today's community meeting. And I see why, because as soon as I heard the first words from Ricky Burgess, he said, how many speakers do we have today? 76? Bye, see you later. That's what he said. And I would actually like to hear a roll call after I speak, because I don't see him, man. Him and Lavelle actually helped draft this proposal, but I don't see them today. I mean, I heard them earlier, but where's their face at? Show your faces. Say you're here. Let us know you're here. Let us know you're listening. I'm glad that Mrs. Cal Smith was able to speak with one of the presumed mayors, but she hasn't spoken with all of the candidates. Okay, and so at this point, I'm just asking our city council members to put their partnerships with politicians to the side and remember their commitments that they made to listen to their communities. Thank you.
The 50th speaker.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
The 50th speaker is Claudia Pierre, followed by Wesley Speary.
Yeah, hello. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chef Claudia Pierre. I'm representing the EAT Initiative, Empowerment, Awareness, and Training Initiative, and also a board member of the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. I am a business owner, a father of 3, and a community advocate. I want to talk to you today about the city's proposed allocations for the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I'm troubled by the lack of investment in our local food system. In the proposed allocations, we already see, like I already have a whole thing drawn out to say, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm pretty embarrassed by some of the people that I know and feel like would have put food, because they helped. Some of the council members literally was delivering food and saw firsthand some of the families that could not move, had no mobility, had no access to food. Literally, we had food drives for people with vehicles right in the Hill District, and I am a Hill District member, 2144 Wiley Avenue. And the people that needed it the most could not even get to the food drives. It's embarrassing. It is hurtful to the business owners that were hurt, the very businesses that we love to patron, that were crushed and crumbled under this. And I will be honest with you, it's embarrassing to our children and our senior citizens that food was not properly mentioned. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things that are definitely a part of this. I do believe that we should do the Pittsburgh Food Trust, Food Justice Trust. $10 million is not enough, but it's something to start with. At the end of the day, we need this to be paused. We need this to be, we need to take our time. And I'm gonna be honest with you, this shows us a lot about the council. And I'm gonna be transparent with you right now. The conversations have to be had around who we choose to lead us in the council. And it's really hurtful for me and the people that we have been really championing to really just try to rush this along like this. And I'm talking from a very hurt, very understanding place. And I've never seen calls ignored and opportunities to meet with people ignored like I have in the last couple of weeks by these very council members that begged us for their votes. So I'm gonna put that out there like that. And I caution you, and I say, true story, you have a community that's watching this with a fine-tooth comb. And I believe that this will tell us a lot about the council in the next few days. And we will learn how to move forward. Like I said, we have a lot of partners with mobility, with the Fair Fares campaign, with the Food Policy Council, the small businesses that I have to represent, because we haven't talked enough about how many people and how many business owners were affected, their families, and the amount of resources that they lost, even especially the Black and brown and the women that didn't get a chance to get some of the PPP and some of the benefits because they were so small and got crushed by some of the bigger corporations. I'm gonna leave it at that. And I'm gonna be honest with you, as a father, as a business owner, as a community advocate, it saddens me. And I'm really looking at people right now. You've heard it all here. I'm looking at people with a very, very close eye and heart. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that we have what we need as a city to come together and make decisions. And our city council is.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Wesley Sperry, followed by Mark Rudolph Stansberry.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Wesley Sperry. I am a resident of East Liberty. I'm here representing myself with my own individual ideas, but I do want to reiterate support for almost everything that all of the speakers have said tonight, with the exceptions, and I feel like I have to say it, the exception of I can't support the allocation of funds to the bridge. And I say that simply because I have read the Treasury's interim rule on the use of these funds, and it sounds like almost no one has read these rules, at least maybe from the legal perspective on passing this law. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but if I'm right, I encourage everyone strongly to read the Treasury's interim rule before voting on any legislation. Make sure you understand it, make sure you get advice of legal counsel, for the reasons that this ARPA money can only be used for reasons specified in the statute and the rules, and most of these infrastructure projects do not appear to meet any of those allowed uses. And if they do not meet those allowed uses, the Treasury is allowed to recoup those funds. So not only would you be disappointing your voters by misusing this money if you vote for unapproved uses, you would also then be on the hook to them and to the city of lost tens, perhaps even hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, to reiterate some of the points, the money does not have to be obligated, as in no debt occurred, until December 31st, 2024, and does not have to be spent until December 31st of 2026. Another additional caveat on the use of some of these capital projects, even if they would fall under this use of lost revenue, the money can only be used for debt or obligations incurred after March 3rd of 2021 in trying to amend the 2021 budget. Some of these things already appear in that budget and therefore are ineligible for the use, and therefore trying to amend the budget at this stage would appear to be an end run around federal legislation, which I also caution against. I've submitted written recommendations. I'm going to try to pick up on ones that aren't written. For example, I believe that a lot of this money should, or a significant amount, should be invested to support minority and women-owned businesses, particularly those that were forced to close their doors or start struggling to stay open because of loss of income and revenue and customers during the pandemic. Grants to local nonprofits that are trying to process the rental assistance applications. They have thousands of pending applications, and these people may very well be eligible, but they will never be able to get through all of those applications, especially before the federal and city's moratoria end. And in order to do that, they simply need the capacity and the human power. And hiring more workers and giving them that money will also alleviate those workers' needs for assistance and allow those workers to then pay their bills. In trying to pass any legislation, I agree, halt this process. There needs to be a data-based, evidence-based, legal-based decision for all the use of these funds, again, to make sure that they do not get clawed.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Mark Rudolph Stansberry, followed by Khalid Rahim.
Thank you so much, Council. I would first like to thank our Council President, Teresa Kell Smith, for her diligence, her expeditious understanding of the matter. I want to enthusiastically support this measure, and I look with great excitement for the great things to come from this measure. I'm speaking on behalf of the Jasper Nairi Center in Sheridan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Khalid Rahim, followed by Christina Howell.
Hi. Could you unmute your mic, please? Okay, you got it.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon. Thank you all for an opportunity to just share a few words. I'd like to join in with the chorus that's calling for allocation of more time. I would just like to be much more specific. I think that we need to postpone, you guys need to postpone voting on this very important issue. $335 million is not something to laugh at. And this is truly a transformative moment in the history of the city of Pittsburgh. And I think that you need to allocate more time for public education, not just discussion, but certainly discussion as well as input from the various sectors within the Pittsburgh community, notably the low income and the Black and brown communities within our great city. Again, this is a very important moment for the city of Pittsburgh. This could be a very transformative moment for the city of Pittsburgh in terms of the allocation and distribution of resources, especially for people of color and for low income and poor people. I think that people would probably feel a certain way if this were to pass without this type of process, knowing that all of you as public officials allocate more time to your campaign to make sure that your constituents know about you and know your platform and your issues, that you would think it more important to allocate more time and resources to educating the public, to educating your constituency, than you allocating time and resources to educate and to receive quality input from that particular constituency about such an important action. So I just want to, again, join in with those who've called for the postponing of any type of vote on this $335 million allocation. I don't really have too much to say about the priority of the items. I think that I would like to wait and see where you guys go with postponing this, and then I join in with others. I know I missed out on something. Again, my name is Khalid Rahim. I'm from the North Side community, and I live in the Manchester neighborhood, 15233. Thank you again for your time, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Next speakers are Christina Howell, followed by Mary Barbush.
Christina Howe.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Christina Howell. I'm Executive Director of Bloomfield Development Corporation and a resident of Bloomfield. Our address at the corporation is 4900 Friendship Avenue, 15224. I'd like to thank all of you for this opportunity to speak tonight and ask for an equitable, people-centered process for developing the spending plan for this historic opportunity. I think it is important that there be more time spent to ensure that we are truly spending money on issues and things that were affected by the pandemic and not simply items that have been put off in the city's budget for a while. I'd also like to take this opportunity to advocate for an increase in the affordable housing line item. I would ask that there be more funding to create affordable rental housing, as well as funding for nonprofits to purchase homes before the prices continue to rise as they are in our neighborhood. I'd like to point out that 64% or more of Bloomfield rent their homes. Rents are rising very quickly. Just in one local apartment building, in February, an apartment rented for $885. It is currently being marketed for $1,700. It's a huge increase. And our staff are hearing from residents consistently who are no longer able to afford their rising rent. And this is in the middle of a pandemic when people are already having extreme difficulty paying their mortgages and paying their rents. So I firmly believe that there needs to be increased funding in those areas. The other thing I'm concerned about is the lack of investment in our local food systems in the proposed allocations. Food insecurity has soared over the last 16 months. 20% of residents were food insecure in 2019. And we know that that has gone up over the last 16 months during the economic shutdown caused by the pandemic. Our Bloomfield Saturday Market saw SNAP spending at our market double in 2020. And that is accounting for and removing the SNAP bonus called Food Bucks that is given to people who use SNAP benefits. So we have proof and data using our market that there is a need for increased spending in the food system. And I want to argue that solving food apartheid should be the #1 priority of any spending that happens in the food system. And
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Mary Barbush, followed by Ikahana Makina.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary Barbush. I am a resident in Allegheny West, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My issue relates to safety, the physical space in Allegheny West. I would like to ask if you could use some of the funds for historic streetlights for the 800 block of West North Avenue in our neighborhood. This is the block that is adjacent to Manchester. These streetlights, I would request that they be wired underground as other neighborhood streets lights here in this community and in Manchester have them because of the storms and things. It's easier. In addition, I would like to request that these that there be monies also for maintenance, because some of the area in the neighborhood that have these lamps, they are not working well, And there needs to be funds for that as well, for these existing lights which have been damaged. Also, if these lights could be consistent in their intensity and color, it would be helpful, because in many of the areas, the lighting in the city of Pittsburgh is harsh. I'm someone who has an eye disease, and when they're very bright with that white blue light, I myself cannot see through them because of flashes. If we could have them be of the more warm yellow light, it would be easier on my eyes, as many other people who have this disease. And also it is better for birds in the environment, I have been told. This is just me, myself, an individual requesting this. And while listening to people speak, I asked maybe if you could use some of the vacant land that the city owns that might be able to be used for gardens in the little neighborhoods, because we have some here in our area that we could benefit from that as well. There's also a plate on Brighton Road that's been for years not fixed, and I don't know if this is something that could also be addressed, but it's over in the 800 block of Brighton Road. So if that could also be fixed, I would appreciate it. Thank you all for your time and energy this evening, and I appreciate your listening to my thoughts. Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking to council. Next speaker, please.
The next speakers are Ikahana Makina, followed by Joshua Malloy.
Thank you.
Greetings. My title is Chief Ikahana Makina. I am the Grand Inca of the Iroquois Confederacy of Aborigine American People. I would like to thank City Council for putting together this forum. It is a pleasure to be among those who are expressing their concerns publicly and letting your voices be heard in this space, and giving your input on how the funds for the American Rescue Plan should be spent. On behalf of my ancestors, I must remind you that you are on stolen land. This is the land of the Aborigine American people, to whom which I am a descendant. Land which the city of Pittsburgh has incorporated for profit and directly benefits as a result of the long history of official depredations and ill-conceived policies. I encourage City Council and the Mayor to use this unique opportunity to allocate at least 10 million Federal Reserve notes in restitution to the Iroquois Confederacy of Aborigine American People as a beginning step towards the immediate remedy necessary to right an ongoing wrong, as spelled out in the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. It also spelled out in the American Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. These funds will be used to redevelop our sacred lands, to continue and create new programs for youth, to develop a community, a cultural center, a food resource center, to address food insecurity, also to address food insecurity, large community gardens throughout what is known as the city of Pittsburgh now, to create affordable housing as it once existed prior to gentrification, river restoration, to address air quality, to run recycling programs, to teach the youth how to be sustainable, to restore recreation centers that have been left dilapidated throughout the city, specifically in urban inner city neighborhoods, to close the economic wealth gap to ensure a brighter future for generations to come. We also want a health and wellness center to practice our own holistic healing. We are the most marginalized, discriminated, and assimilated and misrepresented people in America. I encourage everyone who's on this platform to attend other city council meetings to let your voices be heard while UPMC, one of the largest gentrification corporations, continues to forge upon our land. They have a meeting this coming Wednesday to roll out their master plan at 1:30 this coming Wednesday. So be sure to sign up for this meeting as well. Would like to see the numbers and the volume of people who are coming out to speak out about the $335 million that City Council has oversight of over the next 4 years. I urge you to do the right thing with these funds. I urge you to think about children in foster care as well, and children who are going through the adoption process, for they are quite often already left out and dealing with a lot themselves. They need to be included in this American Rescue Plan as well. And I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Joshua Malloy, followed by Mark Rodriguez.
Josh Malloy with us?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you for joining us. Would you please state your name and the neighborhood for the record?
I'm ceding my time to Mr. Craig. Go ahead. My name is.
Wait.
Here.
Is Mr. Craig registered?
Yep, there you go. My name is Homer Craig.
Wait. No. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Mark Rodriguez.
Thank you. Rodriguez. Mark, you have to turn off your mic, unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mark Rodriguez. I'm from Pittsburgh South Side. I'm a swimming, water polo, and swim coach, lifeguard trainer. Lately, I've been working with the International Swim Coaches Association as their webmaster. So this is called the American Rescue Plan. To me, that has lifeguards written all over it. Before this pandemic even began, I helped call an aquatic summit, and we were addressing this lifeguard shortage. So Rick Flanagan was a helper in that, and all the players around the region attended. And then the pandemic came. So, we know COVID had serious health and wellness issues. It really attacked the respiration for the victims or the people that got ill, and the need for ventilations and ventilators. And our number one asset in the city, I believe, are the public pools, for breathing and exercise. It's easy on the joints. It's for all ages, and if we look at what we have is the Oliver Bathhouse, which is closed. This year we have 8 outdoor pools open, congratulations, but that's 10 less than we had in 2019. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh Public Schools has a dozen indoor pools. They're all closed in evenings, afternoons, nights, weekends, holidays, early mornings, all summer long. So what we really need is some programming. I'm not talking about spray parks. We need coaching, and we need to stress playing well with others. Part of this pandemic, is upon us because of a teamwork issue. If we're able to strive in community, and we practiced and modeled and rewarded goal setting and playing well with others, I think we'd be a lot further along in getting this behind us. So, and I think all this happens at the pools. And this is about infrastructure, and access to the pools in the schools, especially, it happens. We need vestibules with side doors and lighted hallways. We need on-deck changing rooms. We need office space and storage. We need ways to get, the school safe and secure, but we need entries, and we need to be able to videotape as to what's going on in there. And every locker room in the city needs an overhaul. And the kids take 30 kids to the pool, and they're all changing in, toilet stalls, and there's only generally 2 in each facility, and this is infrastructure we already have built, but it hasn't been kept up, and with PPS, in the city, we need to push for lifeguarding, and in certain ways it's a chicken and egg thing too, where if the kids don't like to go to the pools and they're not able to be a good swimmer, they're not going to want to work at the pools, but it starts a whole job system too, where the kids are going to be able to go into nursing and public safety, and being able to have first aid and CPR and recreation and lifelong learning. So, please think about, the aquatics in the city. I would love to have you, join us. If there's anybody in the public wants to come up to Ammon on Tuesday and Thursday night, we're playing water polo and games with the kids. And sometimes we should talk about the North Side and the Pittsburgh project and the pool there that's closed. But it's a human capacity thing. Thanks for listening. Hopefully we can do more with recreation in next administration.
Thank you, Mark. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Sarah Uranskis, followed by Christy Knight.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, please continue. Just state your name and neighborhood for the record.
Sarah Branskis. I work for the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council, and we're located at 5341 Kincaid Street in Garfield. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity for input. The resources in the American Rescue Plan provide a historic opportunity to address the pandemic's direct impacts and reduce our deep income and racial inequities. The Pittsburgh Food Policy Council is composed of people, institutions, organizations, and agencies with a shared mission to create a just, equitable, and sustainable food system. Though our work is specific to the Pittsburgh region, we often learn from the experiences of food policy councils across the country. This applies to the budgets developed around American Rescue Plan funds as well. As an example of what these funds could do, we know that the San Diego Board of Supervisors has allocated $20 million of their total $653 million ARPA funds, about 3%, to a general food assistance category, specifically $10 million for food distribution, $7 million for community gardens, $3 million towards nutrition incentive programs. An additional $1 million are designated for good food purchasing program efforts. Similar efforts are led by our coalition here, an initiative led by the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. Similarly, the city of Phoenix, Arizona is using $9.7 million of their ARPA allocation to strengthen their local food system, including several million for emergency food distribution and disaster relief, as well as $200,000 for a worker cooperative sustainable food system business incubator, $500,000 for up to 100 residents located in food deserts to install backyard gardens and community gardens via pilot project, $1 million for farmland preservation. In partnership with nonprofits and land trusts, they plan to purchase and preserve 100 acres of land for agriculture. $50,000 for a one-year urban agriculture fellowship for high school and college students, with 60% designated specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and $400,000 for council district food action plans, projects, or initiatives with an initial focus on districts with food apartheid. Within the council, we have community partners that navigated the challenges of the pandemic to begin or continue to distribute food in partnership with one another. We have members that create and run community gardens with little to no consistent funding. We have members that aid farmers market shoppers who use supplemental nutrition assistance programs, SNAP funds, administer matching food bucks to increase the reach of those SNAP dollars, and partners that help brick and mortar stores to carry more produce. We know that every dollar of SNAP benefits generates $1.84 in the economy in terms of economic activity. We know that all of these organizations helping to generate that activity address existing needs and could benefit from the funds coming to our city. Our council, members of our council, are asking for the same level of thoughtfulness and foresight that I've highlighted above. We want an equitable and people-centered process for developing the spending plan. Such an unprecedented amount of money should be accompanied by open discussion, an understanding of current needs, and should reflect the immense impact the past year has had on Pittsburghers' lives. We also request the creation of a $10 million Pittsburgh Food Justice Fund to be invested directly into communities.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Christy Knight, followed by Rick Adams.
Hello, my name is Crystal Martha Knight. I'm the community organizer for the Thomas Merton Center on 5129 Penn Avenue in Garfield, Bloomfield. I'll be brief because I don't have much more to say on this. Honestly, that hasn't already been said both tonight and this past Saturday. City Council has to stop this vote. The rush to get this passed leaves little room for a true democratic process, and we need to open up a true public process to do the best with these funds. Most importantly, we need to see this money being invested directly into people's emergency needs. People are struggling. Unemployment issues are rampant across the state as well as here in Pittsburgh. This money could do so much for a lot of folks, and we deserve the time and public process to ensure this money goes to those most in need. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Rick Adams, followed by Quam Ansari,
Mr. Adams, could you please unmute your phone?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank City Council and staff and everyone who has assembled and all the public that has come out and spoken. I've heard a lot of great ideas, and I just want to simply say that I support much of what has been said, if not virtually everything. And I want to remind council and everyone listening that as far as I'm concerned, from what I can observe, and I've been around a little while, to observe different movements, social and cultural and political movements. And we are in a time of great correction, that's what I call it. And one of the hallmarks of that great correction is transparency, and the other is participation. And so we are entering an age where the structures of government and many other institutions are going to be open in ways they haven't been open before. Witness the election in New York City with the weighted ranked voting rather. I would urge you not to vote on this, to take your time. This is not a inconsequential amount of money we're talking about. It's what, approximately 60% of the one annual operating budget. I think there are other monies coming, and certainly all of us have felt tremendous pressure, sorrow, loss, and uncertainty because of the pandemic, and now followed by the economy, that we need to make wise decisions. We need to understand that we're in a new age. And I'm glad that young people have joined my younger self, even though I've been here, in demanding change and accountability, and change that will make sweeping improvements in the lives of the city residents of Pittsburgh. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Next speaker, please.
our next speaker is Kiam Ansari.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Kiam Ansari. I'm a resident of Chartiers. I'm also with the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council and a number of other social justice organizations. I'm going to be very brief. I did submit my comments. If you guys do want to read them in detail, I would just like to reiterate what a lot of people have said on this call tonight. I would like to urge City Council to postpone spending on the American Rescue Plan without a clear and equitable process that includes input on how funds are allocated. We are all on this call tonight asking and urging our City Council to protect our most vulnerable communities by ensuring that we protect critical systems like our drinking water, affordable housing, and our food system. Again, I would like to urge City Council to postpone the vote and to make a investment of $10 million for a food justice fund for the city of Pittsburgh. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Kelly Henderson, followed by Phyllis Gafour.
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Henderson. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for this opportunity tonight. Also, thank you for reading names in advance for most of the call. I didn't hear mine said in advance, but last time I testified in front of City Council was for the city budget process earlier this winter. And I asked for that sort of advanced name reading process so that speakers could prepare on a call that's this long. So thanks for implementing it. I'm a resident of, Kelly Henderson, again, I'm a resident of Homestead now, but until a month ago, I was a decade-long resident of the city of Pittsburgh. And so I know that my comments are less meaningful or important as now a resident of Homestead Borough. But as far as I'm aware, Homestead itself has not received any money through the American Rescue Plan. And so I'm here thinking of my many neighbors and colleagues and speaking as an individual, but as someone who works in the field of sustainability and in education with many community partners and youth. I work at Chatham University, and I also am a volunteer on the Child Nutrition Committee for the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council. And when I lived in the city, I was a volunteer on the board of the Point Breeze North Development Corporation, helping to facilitate a community inclusive input process around affordable housing at the Lexington Technology Park development site. And I've also had my own homes and apartments test high for lead, now in Homestead, but also when I was a renter in Pittsburgh. I understand the challenges of allocating money to our region's various needs and priorities. And that said, I encourage council members to amend the projected budget for the American Rescue Plan to give more money to many things that have already been listed tonight, including investing in the local food system, addressing lead in drinking water, soil, and paint, increasing the stock of long-term affordable housing, investment in pedestrian infrastructure, fund relief, EBT card access, and other initiatives, as already stated, for public transit riders. And beyond that, as everyone's already stated, I encourage the council to delay budget approval until a community inclusive participatory budget process can be held to determine appropriate reallocations. And I am here tonight, like I said, thinking about my last neighbor as I just moved from East Liberty on Stanton Ave, who was a Black single mother who for years has been denied the ability to transfer to appropriate public housing to allow for her son, who's in a wheelchair, to be able to leave if he is, if there's a fire in their apartment. They haven't had an ADA accessible unit available in years. And as a sustainability professional and listening to everyone that was on this call and going through the budget in detail, I also wanted to just kind of point out one specific way that I think the budget could be shifted. The $7.5 million for the purchase of electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. As someone who has a background in energy efficiency and renewable energy, referencing the text drawdown by environmental leader Paul Hawken, even if we are looking at data-driven decision-making in this process, which so far it sounds like we're not, Paul Hawken listed the #1 mathematically proven solution to reducing climate.
Thank you. Can we have the next speaker, please?
The next speaker is Phyllis Gafour, followed by Keely Lombardi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please state your name.
Thank you very much. My name is Phyllis Gafour. My residence is in the Hill District, even though I stay in Elliott through no fault of my own. I am kind of disturbed. The politicization of every aspect of life in Pittsburgh is so disturbing. There are socioeconomic concerns, as my previous speakers have indicated. There were already pockets of poverty so deep that no task force or one program can address everything that's needed. Task force members, city council members who have worked 7 to 10 years cannot understand the depth of food insecurity, not having enough clothes, not having enough money, being ill. But I do, because I've been through all of that recently. There is a need for stipends for non-food items, underwear, winterwear, clothes for children and seniors, so that they can have a minimum quality of life. There is duplication in the people portion for 5 million, existing housing, on the planet portion, 10 million low moderate income housing improvements. The Housing Opportunity Fund was built to help some of that. And it is proposed to get more money. 2 URA programs, the Land Bank and Trust. Where's the money to maintain that, to develop and maintain that? And the planet portion of electric vehicles and a line item for performance for the city of Pittsburgh fleet. To me, that's a duplication of efforts. And so critical things at this point, fund the HRP program for applicants already in the pipeline, fund water purification in and around public housing, fund removal of land, of lead, which is part of the planet portion, and fund street lighting, Dinwiddie Street, Webster and Summers, and other avenues that African Americans in the Hill travel on a daily basis. In the absence of a strong and workable economic policy, please delay your votes until you can get all the information to make quality decisions. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Keely Lombardi, followed by Chef Carlos A. Thomas.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, council members and staff. My name is Keely Lombardi. I'm an intern at the Human Rights City Alliance and a resident of Oakland. I have similar sentiments to those who spoke before me. These ARPA funds have the ability to make long-term impacts in our city, and even though the American Rescue Plan was intended to be administered to provide real, equitable recovery from the pandemic for the Pittsburgh community, I'm not sure it will be doing that to the utmost of its ability as the way it is right now. As we all saw, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the deep inequity experienced throughout the country, especially right here in Pittsburgh. And focusing specifically on the housing sector, the plan lacks funds dedicated to tenants' rights and rent recovery, and that's very, very concerning. Within the housing sector, ARPA funds should be utilized to protect the vast number of renters within the city, as previously stated by other speakers. More funds should be allocated to renters and overall more affordable renter housing. Additionally, I have similar concerns to others that spoke before me about how the spending plan proposed has been neither transparent nor collaborative with the larger Pittsburgh community. I and others within the Human Rights City Alliance focus on the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and I have recognized this rust process as a hindrance of our rights as citizens. And I ask that this vote be held off on until the plan reflects the input that we have heard both tonight and on this past Saturday, the 10th, as well as having a robust public discussion that allows community input. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
The next speaker is Chef Carlos A. Thomas, followed by Dan Yablonsky.
Good evening, everybody. I am going to use my 3 minutes to echo a lot of the sentiments of the people that spoke before me. I would like to make a valid point as that was made before is Reverend Burgess. We need to see you, bro. I live in Homewood and we don't see you enough on this side of the bridge. And with that being said, a lot of these efforts that have been proposed in this ARP plan have not been focused towards food insecurity. One that which we know has plagued this region for at least the last 20 years that a lot of you have been in office. With that being said, we have a city with over 90 neighborhoods. Over 50% of them don't have access to fresh food at all. With that being said, we need more than a Family Dollar. We need more than a dollar store. We need more than something that pretty much deteriorates our health inside of a global pandemic. The service industry is one of the largest industries, not just here in Pittsburgh, but across the country. It's something from unemployment to access to food. We've suffered immensely throughout the pandemic and not really seeing too much thought or effort poured back into our work. We are an industry that has carried this country, not only this city, this region, but this country far beyond what we know it, as some of our professionals have catered to presidents, council people, and just regular people on an everyday basis. The city of Pittsburgh owes this $10 million to be invested into this fund. $10 million is not a lot out of $350 million. It's barely a dent, but we're asking for $10 million just to get us started. We've been feeding our people throughout the last few years with the lack of access of grocery stores and with the lack of access to fresh food. So we're asking for that investment to be captured inside of that $10 million so that, like I said, we can keep doing the work and we can ultimately build on ourselves. I also urge you to stop this rush to continue this vote. It doesn't make any sense after you want to hear from the community and you need to hear from the community, but you're not really putting much effort to the community. That says a lot when a lot of you are coming up for election in these next coming months. I yield the rest of my time.
Next speaker, please.
Dan Yablonsky, followed by Maren Hook.
Hello, Council. My name is Dan Yablonsky. I'm a Bloomfield resident, and I'm speaking today as a member of the Bloomfield Development Corporation's Property and Planning Committee and as a staff member of Pittsburghers for Public Transit. I want to thank every single person who's spoken tonight. I know it's been a long list. This is the type of engagement that comes from a public process. But when it comes to how the city is going to use this $335 million, there's been no conversation. So I'm speaking today in solidarity and echo the message that so many people have said tonight. Please, Council, pause the vote on this money. At this point, almost every resident of Pittsburgh and indeed our country have heard about the American Rescue Plan, or they're at least familiar with the fact that the federal government has passed 3 enormous historic relief bills to help get our country back on its feet after the pandemic. But of these people, I know that just a sliver are familiar with the dollar amount that's coming to Pittsburgh or how that money is going to be spent to help them. I can be confident in saying this because the spending plan for this money was released just a week ago, and because no one outside of the mayor's office or city council has had any input on how these funds should be spent. There has been no public process. The only thing remotely similar to a public process on these funds was the direction that our city should head was that there was an election in May where the city of Pittsburgh handily voted out the Peduto administration. So why would you, as city councilors elected by that same electorate, let his administration unilaterally dictate how this money should be spent? $350 million is a transformational amount of money. Never before has our city seen this much money available to meet our needs, and it's not likely to come again soon. When the federal government passed this money, they also issued guidelines on how this money should be spent. They were very clear, saying that there should be some level of community input. The federal government has done its job. Now, council, please do yours. Pause the vote. Please open up a process and hear what residents of Pittsburgh have to say. This is our public money. Please, access to affordable transit, access to healthy food, access to dignified housing. Over the last year, and despite enormous odds, people have spoken up loudly and clearly with visions of how this money can provide for these needs. But none of those people's ideas are reflected in the spending plan because no people have given input. The problems that the last year have accentuated have been a slow burn for many of us. They won't be fixed with a snap vote. It's simple. Please wait, practice what you preach, create the type of deep democracy that we claim to love, invite public conversation on how this money should be spent.
Thank you. Next speaker.
The last speaker is Maren Cook.
Mary Cook. Maren Cook.
Okay. All right. My name is Maren Cook. I live at 6745 Forest Glen Road. Thanks for providing this opportunity to speak out, though I agree that these hearings are rather overdue. The American Rescue Plan is bringing a giant windfall to Pittsburgh, and the city should consider carefully how to spend it. The plan recently released by Mayor Peduto should not be acted on in haste. There has been little to no public input prior to these hearings. We need transparency and inclusion of diverse voices. And not surprisingly, while the proposed plan is quite broad, there is no mention of quite a few other vital programs and purposes like rental assistance, food security, early childhood education, or stormwater. Pittsburgh is a tale of two cities. It's been rated the most livable city, but also the worst city for Black people, and especially, as shown by the city's own commission, for Black women. Centuries of unequal treatment under the law, read the book The Color of Law by Richard Rossbot if you haven't already, need to be unwound, and long under-resourced communities and marginalized people need to be lifted up. Can this infusion of federal funds help? Starting last year, the pandemic laid bare these inequities in our communities and the fragility of our local food system. These problems aren't new, they're just more widespread and more apparent. By investing in local agriculture and food justice programs, for instance, we can help to improve lives now and build resilience for the future. The Food Justice Fund, already mentioned, would be a great start. What sort of issues are even appropriate for pandemic recovery funding? We need assurance that the expenditures will meet the requirements of the American Rescue Plan. I'm not sure that some of the infrastructure building in the proposal will fall into that category. Would reparations to African Americans and/or Indigenous people on whose ancestral land we live fit the criteria? In general, I want to see much greater transparency and the inclusion of citizens' voices in this process and the prioritization of the most vulnerable. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And I just want to be clear that we have no other speakers on the line because I've seen some names not called.
The names that weren't called, Brenda was going through and checking to see if they were in the line and they weren't there.
Okay, so we did verify. Okay, I just want to make sure
Yes.
because somebody said they were on the line and we didn't call them. And with that said, do we have that exhaust our list of speakers? I want to thank Madam Clerk and her team, Kim and Ashley, for working so hard on this. and for Kim calling all the names. Thank you very much. And with that said, is there anything from members?
Madam President, just briefly, if I may. It's been
Yes.
a very long evening. I mean, normally we do kind of go around and we did it on Saturday because it was a long hearing and I know it's very late tonight, but I just wanted to say that there's not really even much of a need to do what I usually do, which is to reiterate what we heard. We very clearly heard a call to slow down the vote, at least on a majority of the line items here. I don't think anyone was calling for a slowdown on the votes to stabilize our city workforce. But for the many of the rows on that spreadsheet that is attached to our legislation, we don't need to rush, right? And that's kind of what we heard. And so maybe we'll all, after lots of conversation, come to those, a comfort level with those items or very similar to those items, but that the people haven't felt included in the process. So I wanted to say that I definitely heard that loud and clear. I think that was unmistakable. It's an unmistakable call to slow down on the majority of the allocations. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Anything from any other members? Councilman Coghill.
Thank you, Madam President. First and foremost, I want to thank all the callers from today and last week. And I really want them to know, I come here with a complete open mind, and I get the fact that they feel like they have not been part of the discussion. So, hopefully last week and today helped in that manner, but I did want to say how much I appreciate their call. And I really appreciate calls from across the city. I feel I know what I need, infrastructure wise in my district mostly, but it's really interesting to hear all the callers. And again, I appreciate their calls. For me, I just want to tell you two things that stuck out with me was the PWSA, the 20 million. Many of you on council know that PWSA does not service my district. So if we're talking about moving that to, storm and water mitigation and other forms of lead mitigation, I'm fine with that. But that was kind of a sticking problem with me, and I'll continue to talk with the administration with that. The other thing really was a land bank. I feel strongly that we need the land bank, to deal with these properties that we have. And I think we need the investment there. So $10 million, I guess, is what we allocated for that off the top. I'm not quite sure I'm at the comfort level I need to be with that. Three things I did here tonight. I just jotted down the three I felt most prevalent things that I heard from the callers this evening was, food insecurity. As growing up from a poor family, a struggling family, struggle to make rent, that hits my heart, and I'm always open to, more money towards food insecurity in whatever form or fashion it may be. Rental assistance too. I heard that a lot, rental assistance, again, strikes home with me. So, and I'll save my comments for tomorrow and as we move forward with this process. But I really just wanted the callers to know that, I think most council members, I'm speaking for me only, at least, I come here with an open mind. I appreciate their calls. I like hearing from other parts of the city. Funny that nobody from my district calls in on this issue, but I feel like they give me the directive as to what they want to see done. And, I'll continue to talk with my colleagues in the administration with what that is. So that's it, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Seeing none, the bills will, I just want us to say a few words.
Madam
myself.
President?
Yes,
Sorry, I raised my hand.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to also thank all the speakers who came today and on Saturday. And it was, I'm just grateful for all the people who give their time to come and speak, and also to my fellow council colleagues for coming and listening, and everyone who's supporting us in this, staff and everyone here tonight. I too heard loud and clear that people want to have more of a say in this process. And I think that this can be the beginning of not only a more deliberative process for the spending of these funds, which I don't think everyone understands, can be reallocated in future years. If we do get an infrastructure bill that passes the federal government, it can change the way that we look at certain projects that are allocated 2 or 3 years from now in this process. But we don't have that yet, so we have to work with what we have right now. That said, I think that the process that we have for both allocating these funds and the budget process can be totally reimagined, just like we're reimagining everything else in the world right now. It's like a reset, and I'd like to see that happen with the next budget as well. Thinking about the multi-pronged approach we can use to reach communities who don't usually engage in the budget. We say that people don't want to engage in the budget. I think it's because we haven't totally tried all the different ways that and methods we have available to us to reach people who might care about things other than the infrastructure in their own backyard, and might care about other needs across the city if we just engage them the right way. So that's my passion project. I'm going to continue working on it, and I do think we need to slow down this process. Not until the end of the year. I would say, let's just hold off until after recess and have a process that allows us to engage a little bit more with the people who are calling for more time and more understanding, and help educate them on all the ins and outs of this, because I think they're hungry for that information as well. So thank you.
Any other members? Councilman Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I want to thank all speakers for coming tonight and letting us know that you're listening in and you're paying attention to what we're going to, go forward with in the coming days or months or whatever we decide. And I just want to let everyone know that I hear all the voices in terms of whether or not we should spend the money on public infrastructure versus social programs versus rental assistance. And I'm looking forward to the coming days, weeks, months, and even into the next administration to see how we spend those dollars. So thank you for your time and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other members? Seeing none, I'm just going to say that in talking with my colleagues, some of us are going to go into communities to have actual communications and discussions, conversations with people. Council leadership is going to come into your neighborhoods, into your district, and have those conversations. If some of the members want to join us, you're welcome to join us, but I think it's time for us to go into some of the neighborhoods and hear from some of the people, and for them to hear from some of us as well, about where we are with this and how we feel. And I think it's really a good time for us to get into the neighborhoods and into the districts, and for us to actually have some conversations. But having said that, we also have a lot of people waiting for this help and waiting for this money. And I keep hearing people talking about the next administration, or then after the recess, or after something, or after this. Well, there are a lot of people waiting for a very long time for help. And today and tomorrow is actually too late for a lot of them. And so as I hear everybody talking, I'm going to just let people know that the process will be that this will be up for a preliminary vote on Wednesday amongst council, and council members will continue to meet during that time. We're going to schedule, I have to give the clerk 24 hours notice for some of the meetings, public meetings that we're going to have. We're going to schedule some of those with council's leadership into the different districts. And then we will also go into the conversations. After the conversations, we'll go into the voting, and this can continue into after this is even passed. And there's always, as I mentioned, chances for amendments, and there's time to work together. And I have offered the possibly new administration an opportunity to discuss. I've not heard any recommendations. So I'm assuming that nobody has anything that they'd want to change on some of the things that we've put in or putting forward. And if they do, I assume that they will talk to the council's leadership on that, so that we know what we're doing here. And if not, we're willing to work with whomever the mayor is in the next term on any possible amendments that we can do at that time. But in the meantime, we will be coming into the districts and having some serious conversations. So with that said, can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second. It was adjourned. Thank you.